Chapter 419. The 6 flying artifacts sped across the sky and did not stop at all, but there were exceptions. Team 2 followed Yuchincho's instructions and invited all the young disciples who were being interrogated by the Cultivation Alliance to Utopia No. 1 to accept Yuchincho's ideological reform. However, Yuchincho had a bad reputation, and some disciples were really afraid. They did not want to go, but they could not stand the other party's warm invitation. After meeting Yuchincho, they were instantly touched by Yuchincho's spring breeze-like warmth. After receiving the greeting gifts, they regretted listening to the rumors. In Yuchincho's words, this was called moving with emotion and understanding with reason. Of course, that was a greeting gift. The sect set up many similar interrogation points everywhere, and then set up a communication matrix within a certain range. Naturally, this was to make it convenient for them to report to the Cultivation Alliance in time if they discovered anything suspicious. Therefore, the Cultivation Alliance received the news that Yuchincho's 6 flying artifacts were closing in. The interrogation points asked, did Yuchincho and the others cooperate with the interrogation? Did they cause any trouble? What surprised the various sects was that the replies from many of the interrogations all said, Yuchincho actively cooperated with the interrogations. His attitude was very good, and there were no signs of him causing trouble at all. Accidents were accidents, but not causing trouble was a good thing. The sects that had participated in the poaching sighed in relief. Daluo's sect had instructed their disciples to be on guard. If they encountered Yuchincho and his attitude was not good, they must tolerate it as much as they could, lest Yuchincho take the opportunity to cause trouble. But after receiving such news, Zhu Xianxian was relieved. It seemed that Yuchincho did not dare to go against the entire Cultivation Alliance. At least he knew what was good for him. When the Daluo sect disciples received the warning from the sect, they were all terrified. Everyone knew that Yuchincho had a deep grudge with the Daluo sect. They had clashed with each other again and again. Even the sect master's son was killed by that bastard. What else could he not do? It was said that he had brought more than 600 cultivators at the crossing calamity stage with him. What should he do? Zhao Chang was an early-stage tribulation passing elder of the Daluo sect. He was usually by the side of Luo Kuan, one of the top experts of the Daluo sect. Now that he had been sent to a checkpoint of the Daluo sect, it was truly a waste of his talents. In this battle, Luo Kuan and several experts in the late tribulation passing stage had come to help the Daluo sect. He could be considered the number 1 figure among the people from the Daluo sect. After receiving Zhu Xianxian's report about Yuchincho, Luo Kuan ordered his men to calculate Yuchincho's route and sent his trusted aide, Zhao Chang, to the place where Yuchincho must pass. The purpose was simple. Put aside the past and try to restrain the disciples from clashing with Yuchincho at this time. Otherwise, they would become a laughing stock to the other sections. Now was not the time to settle the score. Zhao Chang had been with Luo Kuan for a long time. In the Daluo sect, no one dared to disrespect him. After a long time, he inevitably became a little arrogant. In his heart, he also felt that he had been wronged. He had been sent to a small checkpoint to deal with a rogue. Although he was unwilling, he did not dare to object to Luo Kuan's arrangement. In the sea of clouds, the Daluo sect's flying artifact was hidden. This way, it was convenient for them to observe the surroundings. On the flying artifact, there were 15 people, including Zhao Chang. A leader named Lu Su looked at the arrogant Zhao Chang and asked carefully, Elder Zhao, why does the Yuchincho always make life difficult for our Daluo sect? Humph. Zhao Chang glared at him and snorted. You Daluo sect disciples should remember this. Kind people get bullied, and tame horses get ridden. Our Daluo sect is ranked second among the righteous sects, so you must show the backbone of a great sect. Don't be like some people who can remain indifferent even when their own sons are killed after suffering a bit. Humph. Boosting the morale of others while lowering our own prestige is a great humiliation to the Doluo sect. Lu Su clicked his tongue. He had long heard that this elder Zhao was arrogant, but he didn't think he would dare say such things to that person. He naturally knew who Zhao Chang's son was killed, but the topic was too sensitive. He didn't dare continue. If word got out, an early core formation realm disciple like him wouldn't be able to bear the consequences. Thinking of this, Lu Su couldn't help but worry. As soon as he received the news from the sect, he was prepared to avoid Yu Qianqiu's flying artifact and hide in the clouds. No matter how much Yu Qianqiu hated the Doluo sect, he couldn't possibly search for them everywhere. Who knew that the front lines would send this guy to restrain them? From his tone, it sounded like he was here to restrain them. He was clearly pushing them into a pit of fire. Sigh. Just hide in the Doluo sect and act arrogantly. Why didn't you think about what kind of person Yu Qianqiu was? He didn't care what sect you were from. Even sect master Luo Qingtian, a mid-tribulation passing cultivator, lost an arm in a one-on-one duel. Why did you, an early tribulation passing cultivator, come looking for trouble? Lu Su turned around and exchanged a glance with the people behind him. He could see that everyone had a hint of worry on their faces, and it was clear that they all had the same concerns as him. Lu Su couldn't help but shake his head with a wry smile. He hoped that Elder Zhao didn't want to lose face in front of the disciples and deliberately said something like that. What he feared had come. In the distance, the sound of several flying artifacts piercing through the air could be heard. With a little effort, they could tell that there were 6 flying artifacts, which matched the number of flying artifacts Yu Qianqiu had brought. The expressions of the dozen or so people changed drastically. After looking at each other, they all looked at Elder Zhao. Zhao Chang snorted slightly and steered his flying artifact into the clouds to look into the distance. In the distance, 6 black dots were flying in their direction at high speed and would soon meet them. Zhao Chang directly controlled the flying Dharma artifact to rush out and tyrannically block the path of the 6 flying Dharma artifacts. The 6 flying artifacts had clearly noticed them as well and slowed down as they approached. The group from the exalted sect sized up the 6 celestial artifacts in front of them. They were oddly shaped, and even under the bright sun, they exuded an eerie aura. They even had eyes at the front, and through those transparent eyes, they could vaguely see people sitting inside. The Daluo sect is here on orders from the Cultivation Alliance to interrogate suspicious cultivators. If you have a pass, hand over your pass. If you don't, open your cabin and accept the interrogation. Zhao Chang clearly wanted to show off his strength to Yu Qianqiu and the others. When he roared, even the disciples behind him felt as though their ears were about to explode. The Daluo sect disciples held their breaths and watched the other party's movements. After Zhao Chang's shout, the 3 flying artifacts in the triangular formation at the front suddenly moved. It was as if the eyes had suddenly closed. The group did not understand what was going on. Zhao Chang snorted coldly and shouted again, "The Daluo sect is here on orders from the Cultivation Alliance." "How dare you!" The tone of the shout suddenly changed. The group of people were also startled by the other party's movements. They saw the 3 flying artifacts in front of them shooting over in a frenzy, directly colliding with the small flying artifacts beneath their feet. They did not even say a word to each other. "Oh my God!" The Daluo sect disciples cried out and jumped down from their flying artifacts. After they dodged the impact, they released their flying swords and steadied themselves in the air. Looking up, they saw that Zhao Chang was clearly trying to dodge with his flying artifact. However, it happened so suddenly, and the 3 monstrous things had deliberately planned for this. There was a loud bang in the air. Zhao Chang leaped into the air and flew away. The flying artifact under his feet was knocked far away, and he quickly rolled toward the dear earth to hug it. The group of disciples still had lingering fear, and a bad feeling welled up in their hearts. At first, everything was fine, but when they heard that it was the Daluo sect, they immediately became impolite. They clearly did not like the Daluo sect. How dare you? How dare you defy the decree of the Cultivation Alliance? Zhao Chang shouted, and a cold light flashed from his storage bag. Under his guidance, it first shot into the sky, then quickly turned around and shot toward one of the flying artifacts. Bang! There was a loud bang, and the flying sword hit its target smoothly. Zhao Chang recalled his flying sword and was slightly taken aback. Under his full strength, the other party's flying artifact was actually undamaged. Even the scratch was not very obvious, almost unnoticeable. Oh my! What material is this flying artifact made of? The expressions of the Daluo sect disciples below all changed. They saw that Zhao Chang's sword seemed to have poked a hornet's nest. Dozens of black shadows flashed out from the flying artifact that was hit. More than a dozen of them shot into the sky and surrounded Zhao Chang from all directions. The rest of them scattered. The disciples' vision blurred, and they found that each of them was standing in front of a masked man in black, staring at them indifferently. The words, "itinerant cultivator," on the men's chests made the disciples subconsciously shiver. They immediately remembered the news they had heard recently. Yen Bugue led a group of tribulation stage experts to sneak attack the 100 Flowers Valley. Yu Qianchou suddenly attacked, and the 600 itinerant cultivators under him killed almost all of the tribulation stage experts without suffering any losses. Zhao Chang looked around in the sky and saw that he was surrounded by masked men in black, and they were all at the early stage of the tribulation stage, similar to his cultivation level. He immediately waved his hand and shouted, "How dare you! I am a disciple of Daluo sect's Honorable Luo Kuan. You itinerant cultivators dare to surround me. Are you tired of living? Who is Luo Kuan?" A strange question came from below. Zhao Chang looked down and saw a man and two women standing on one of the flying artifacts. The man was asking an enchanting woman a question. The enchanting woman giggled and said, "Luo Kuan is the honorable cultivator of Daluo sect in the late stage of the tribulation stage. It is said that he is ranked third in the Daluo sect. He is the leader of the Daluo sect's expedition to the East Sea." "Oh. Then I'll have to ask him why his Daluo sect keeps looking for trouble with me." The man nodded slightly. Zhao Chang shouted, "Who is down there? Come up and answer me." Even at this time, the man's tone was still so unyielding. As expected of a big sect. Where did this old bastard come from? He really doesn't know his place. After the man cursed, he waved his hand and pointed. "Cut that stubborn guy into a human stick, seal his dantian, and bring him here. Don't kill him. This is my greeting gift to the Daluo sect." Chapter 420. If you remove his limbs, you'll be called a human stick. The Daluo sect members were shocked to hear this. Seeing him call out to these wandering cultivators, they could vaguely guess who he was. "You're Yu Qianchou." Zhao Chang's eyes widened in anger. How could he hesitate when he heard the other party's words? Before the wandering cultivators could make a move, he released his stellar energy to protect himself. His sword created a huge sword shadow with all his might, and he slashed out wildly, forcing the masked wandering cultivators in front of him to retreat. It seemed that he was not afraid, or he would not have to run for his life. But with so many people here, and with his stellar energy slowing him down, where could he run? He had just run a few dozen meters when a group of flying swords attacked him, hitting his stellar energy with a bang bang. He was knocked upside down in the air. A dozen or so black shadows flashed and immediately trapped him again. The dozen or so people called back their flying swords and raised them together, creating a huge sword shadow that struck Zhao Chang's stellar energy from all directions. With a loud bang, the protective aura shield instantly disappeared. Zhao Chang, who was inside, was also shocked until he was dizzy. His face was pale, and blood oozed from his nostrils. His eyes were dazzled, but he knew that survival was the most important thing at this time. He wanted to raise his sword to protect himself, but he found that his arms were light. When he came back to his senses, Zhao Chang let out a scream of horror. He didn't know when his arms and legs had been separated from his body. No wonder they were so light. You Qianqiu. Zhao Chang howled in grief, but a black shadow flashed by and struck his abdomen with a palm. His body shook, and he immediately felt his dantian locked, unable to circulate his spiritual origin. His whole body quickly withered, and he quickly fell from the sky. The people below grabbed his belt and quickly patted the roots of his severed limbs, stopping the gushing blood. You Qianqiu, you'll die a horrible death. Zhao Chang howled unwillingly. Not far away, Lu Su sighed slightly. He was really used to being flattered in the Deluo sect. He was so arrogant that he didn't even know who he was. He only regretted it when he suffered a loss. Hee. I'd like to see who will die a horrible death. Sharp-tongued, come on. Break his teeth and pull out his tongue. Yu Qianqiu sneered with his hands behind his back. This was the first time he had encountered such a reckless person. If he did not treat him well, he would be letting down the grand immortal sect's efforts in nurturing him. Yu Qianqiu, don't you dare. As soon as Zhao Chang said that, the masked man lifted him up high and punched him in the mouth. The sound of his teeth cracking was hair-raising. The Deluo sect disciples watched as the masked man moved his hand around Zhao Chang's mouth. Then, the masked man pulled out something bright red and threw it away. Zhao Chang's neck went limp and he fainted. The disciples trembled in fear as they looked at the masked man in front of them. Purple Dress turned her head slightly to the side, as if she couldn't accept something that was too cruel. The Allure Beauty's pupils shrank slightly. Yu Qianqiu looked coldly at the Deluo sect disciples around him and said indifferently, "You're just small fries in the Deluo sect. I shouldn't have bothered with you. If you want to blame someone, blame yourselves for being Deluo sect disciples and getting involved in the grudge between me and the Deluo sect. You can't blame others for this." He waved his hand lightly and said, "Cripple their cultivation, but spare their lives." The dozen or so Deluo sect disciples immediately turned pale with fright. They had cultivated so hard, who would be willing to be a mere mortal? Once their cultivation was crippled, it would be a fate worse than death. Now, they probably couldn't do it anymore. There was no need for any discussion. The dozen or so disciples held on to their last glimmer of hope and fled frantically. However, the difference in their cultivation was too great. In the blink of an eye, the masked man caught up to them. Cries of pain rang out in the air as their dantian was destroyed. From then on, they would no longer be able to gather true yuan to cultivate. The group of disciples who were as limp as sheep were thrown into the flying artifacts. The 6 black figures moved again and sped east. At the shore of the eastern sea, in the empty backyard of a large residence, a communication array was set up. 4 elders wearing the Deluo sect's uniform frowned. The one standing at the front was Luo Kuan, and the 3 behind him were also consecrators of the Deluo sect. They were called Cui Zhaofan, Li Mengbai, and Zhu Zhao. Luo Kuan said to one of the disciples in the spirit stone array, "Still no contact?" The disciple replied with some fear, "I've already asked the disciples of the other sects nearby to help me search. They really haven't found any disciples from our sect. It's already been a day. It's impossible for Zhao Chang and the others to not contact this place for so long. Something must have happened." As Luo Kuan spoke, he turned to look at the 3 elders behind him. The 3 of them nodded slightly, clearly agreeing with him. Zhu Xianxian, who was standing to the side, bowed respectfully to the 4 elders and said, "For consecrators, in this disciple's opinion, there shouldn't be any accidents under normal circumstances. If there really is an accident, I'm afraid that Yu Qianqiu will have something to do with it. If we calculate the time we lost contact with them, it should be around the same time as Yu Qianqiu. Luo Kun nodded slightly, then asked the other 3 consecrators, "What do you think?" "Zhu Xianxian, I want to ask you something," Li Mengbai, the youngest of the 4 consecrators, said as he looked into the sky. "Consecrator, please ask." "This disciple will tell you everything he knows," Zhu Xianxian said respectfully. Li Mengbai slowly retracted his gaze and stared at him, saying, "You've interacted with Yu Qianqiu the most, so you should know him well. If something really happened to Zhao Cheng at the hands of Yu Qianqiu, I want to ask you, why does Yu Qianqiu keep targeting our Deluo sect? This person is narrow-minded, and he's a notorious scoundrel in the cultivation world. Ever since he became enemies with our Deluo sect, he's been harboring a grudge against us. If we don't get rid of this person and allow him to continue developing, he'll become a scourge to our sect sooner or later," Zhu Xianxian said in one breath. "Oh." Li Mengbai nodded noncommittally and said, "I heard that the Cultivation Alliance's idea to divide up the 600 cultivators under Yu Qianqiu was your idea." "Ah." Zhu Xianxian suddenly realized that the consecrator's tone was a little off. He paused and said, "Yes, this disciple believes that we can't let them grow any further and should disband them as soon as possible. That's why I came up with this idea. All the other sects think the same way." "Oh." Li Mengbai nodded and asked again, "Then why did I hear that Yu Qianqiu didn't provoke our Deluo sect back in the 100 Flowers Valley, but you always went against Yu Qianqiu?" "This disciple did not go against Yu Qianqiu. I only fought for the interests of our sect. This is my duty," Zhu Xianxian said with some fear. Zhu Zhao, who was standing to the side, took a step forward and said in a deep voice, "As the head of our sect's external affairs, you should fight for the interests of our sect. This is the right thing to do. Remember this in the future." His words affirmed Zhu Xianxian's contribution. "Yes, this disciple will remember," Zhu Xianxian said sincerely. Zhu Zhao was his uncle. If it weren't for this uncle, he wouldn't have been able to become the external manager of the Deluo sect. Zhu Zhao's words were clearly helping him out of this predicament. Li Mengbai glanced at the uncle and nephew, then exchanged glances with the other 2 consecrators and said nothing more. Looking at the time, Yu Qianqiu and the others should have arrived by now. Whether or not Yu Qianqiu and Zhao Chang's disappearance was caused by him, we can ask him. After saying that, Zhu Zhao turned to Zhu Xianxian and asked, "Have there been any movements from Limitless Island recently?" "There hasn't been any big movement, but there are still reinforcements coming from time to time." Zhu Xianxian hesitated for a moment, then said, "There has been something strange recently. Corpses are constantly floating over from Wuji Island. After the various sects have fished them up and examined them, they have all dug pits and buried them. In the past few days, there have probably been more than 10,000 corpses." The 4 of them looked at each other. Zhu Zhao frowned and said, "Can you tell where they came from? Are they mortals or cultivators?" "They are all wearing Huaxiao's clothing. Most of them are mortals, but those cultivators are the disciples of the various sects who were kidnapped in the previous battles. The main meridians of those mortals were severed. Clearly, they died from having their blood drained. As for those cultivators, they are even stranger. Holes have been dug out of their dantian, as if someone had taken away their core or nascent soul. This is really puzzling," Zhu Xianxian shook his head and said. "Something like this actually happened? Those people don't even let mortals go. What are they trying to do?" Luo Kun said angrily. As they were talking, the sound of several flying artifacts piercing through the air came from afar. In the blink of an eye, 6 of them flew past the courtyard. Zhu Xianxian looked at the sky and said, "It should be Yu Qianqiu and the others." "That's good." Zhu Zhao sneered at them and said, "Let's go take a look at what this Yu Qianqiu looks like, the one who made our Deluo sect lose face. We can also ask him if what happened to Zhao Cheng has anything to do with him." The few Deluo sect consecrators nodded in tacit agreement and walked outside together. Clearly, they all wanted to get to know this Yu Qianqiu. Zhu Xianxian, who was following behind them, sneered. Since the 4 consecrators are personally coming, let's see where this Yu Qianqiu can run to now. Although the sect's defensive line was long, the main force was gathered in this Wanghai town. Due to the prominent terrain, it was suitable for observing the enemy. In addition, the mortals who lived here had been forcibly moved away, so it naturally became the first choice for the sects to stay. There was a large open space in the town. Originally, it was a place where the fishermen who fished by the sea gathered to dry and repair their nets. Now, it had become a good place for the sects to gather manpower. At this moment, many people from the sects slowly walked out. Seeing the 6 strange flying artifacts land in the sky, everyone knew that Yu Qianqiu had arrived. Aside from wanting to see Yu Qianqiu, the 600 wandering cultivators were also the focus of everyone's attention. After all, many sects had paid a large amount of spirit stones for them. If they were really worth fighting for, many sects would not give up so easily. The leading flying artifacts hatch opened, and Yu Qianqiu slowly walked out with a dark expression. Behind him were the beauty of 100 charms and purple dress. The other flying artifacts did not move, and the 600 wandering cultivators did not come down either. Something was strange. More and more people gathered around. Yu Qianqiu looked around with a dark expression and sneered. He turned around and shouted, "Throw those Daluo sect guys out." Chapter 421. The various sects glanced at each other, then turned their gazes to the Daluo sect side, a trace of doubt in their eyes. Could there be people from the Daluo sect on these 6 flying artifacts? The Daluo sect's representatives looked as if they had expected this. The disappearance of Zhao Qiang and the others was indeed related to Yu Qianqiu. As long as they were still alive, everything was fine. However, they were afraid that Yu Qianqiu would destroy the evidence after killing them and refuse to admit to it. If that happened, even if they could find out the truth, it would take a lot of effort. Zhu Xianxian sneered. If the people who came out were really Zhao Qiang and the others, then today's matter would be settled. With the 4 great reverends of the Daluo sect here, they would not let Yu Qianqiu get away scot-free again. As soon as Yu Qianqiu finished speaking, 15 masked men in black flashed out from the cabin door behind him. Each of them had a person in their hands, and they threw them forward, causing them to cry out in pain. Everyone looked over and saw that these people were indeed wearing the uniform of the Daluo sect, and each of them was struggling weakly on the ground. One of them was covered in blood, and the most frightening thing was that all 4 of his limbs had been chopped off. At this moment, he was facing the Daluo sect's direction with his mouth wide open, howling in pain. From the look of grief and indignation on his face, it was clear that he had nowhere to vent his endless hatred. None of the people present were ordinary people, and their eyesight was far stronger than that of mortals. After a closer look, they were all shocked. The one who had lost all 4 limbs was actually Zhao Qiang, a disciple of Reverend Luo Kun of the Daluo sect. As for the other disciples, their cultivations had been crippled. Everyone was shocked. This Yu Qianqiu was too bold. After leaving people in such a state, he didn't even know to kill them, instead throwing them out in front of everyone. It seemed like their previous guess was correct. Yu Qianqiu must have known that the Daluo sect had come up with the idea to poach his people, and now he was here to take revenge. What a lunatic. Everyone from the Daluo sect paled. Zhu Xianxian even cried out in alarm, "Elder Zhao," and rushed over in a flash. The 15 black-clothed men did not need to be told, they all flashed in front of Yu Qianqiu, blocking Zhu Xianxian. Zhu Xianxian was well informed, so he naturally knew how powerful these masked men were. He stopped in his tracks and pointed at Yu Qianqiu, shouting, "Yu Qianqiu, how dare you treat my Daluo sect's disciple like this?" At this point, there was no need for the Daluo sect's people to call out to them. All of them quickly rushed over, and soon, over 1,000 of them had arrived. Without saying a word, the 15 masked men released flying swords from their storage pouches and held them in their hands as they faced off against the 1,000 exalted sect disciples without the slightest fear. Zhu Xianxian turned around and saw so many Deluo sect disciples backing him up. His courage was boosted, and he jabbed his finger at Zhu Xianxian again. "Yu Qianqiu, today is the day you die. All of you, back off." At Yu Qianqiu's order, the 15 black-clothed men dragged the dozen or so Deluo sect disciples on the ground and quickly moved behind him. Yu Qianqiu's cold gaze swept across the Deluo sect, and he slowly took a few steps forward. Then, he stepped on Zhao Chang, who was struggling and howling, so hard that he could barely move. "How dare you!" The Deluo sect's revered elders shouted in unison. Yu Qianqiu's actions were no different from slapping the Deluo sect's face in public. Zhu Xianqian's body moved. He wanted to go over and save Yu Qianqiu, but he saw Yu Qianqiu take out 2 big black sabers from his storage pouch. Zhu Xianxian jumped in fright. He forcefully stabilized himself and didn't rush over. "You want to fight?" Yu Qianqiu raised an eyebrow. The 2 sabers in his hands clashed, and the sound of metal clapping resounded through the air. It was neither wood nor metal, and no one could tell what rare material the sabers were made of. With the clapping of the sabers, the cabin doors of the flying magic artifacts all opened. Everyone's eyes widened, and more than 600 masked loose cultivators came out in an instant. Yu Qianqiu turned his head and glanced at them. It seemed that he had found the feeling of being the boss in his previous life, calling on his subordinates to fight. He had worked hard for so long, and this was the day he had been waiting for. He turned back to the Deluo sect and sneered, "I'll play with you if you want to use force, but I still want to make things clear. Besides being a trustworthy person, I'm also a reasonable person." The various sects looked at the strength of both sides in shock. The Deluo sect had almost double the number of masked loose cultivators. There were nearly 100 tribulation stage cultivators and 4 peak experts in the final stage. On the other hand, on Yu Qianqiu's side, more than 600 cultivators were all in the tribulation stage. The purple-clothed girl was also in the final stage. It was said that she had killed an expert of the same cultivation level in the 100 Flowers Valley. She could probably fight against 2 of them. The strength of both sides was completely on par. Seeing this, the various sects could not help but feel a little emotional. This guy had really grown. He had the strength to fight against the second largest sect of the Orthodox sections. Of course, this was only a portion of the Deluo sect's strength. It would be a joke if they thought that they could fight against the entire Deluo sect with just 600 people. How could a large sect that had stood in the cultivation world for thousands of years be shaken by a mere 600 tribulation stage cultivators? However, what the various sects did not know was that these 600 people were also a portion of Yu Qianqiu's strength. Utopia's army of nearly 10,000 was already preparing for battle. Once the time was ripe, Yu Qianqiu would probably attack the Deluo sect first. One was a powerful force that was out in the open, while the other was a huge army of cultivators hiding in the dark. Sooner or later, there would be a day when they would clash fiercely. Who would win and who would lose? Luo Kun walked over slowly and pushed Zhu Xianxian behind him. After glancing at the grotesque Xiao Chang on the ground, he stared coldly at Yu Qianqiu and spat out 2 words. "Release him." His attitude was very firm, and his meaning was very clear. "I don't care if you want to fight or reason with me. Release him unconditionally first, or the consequences will be dire." The other 3 worshippers also walked over with ashen faces and stood beside Luo Kun. When Zhu Zhao brushed past Zhu Xianxian, he also glared at him coldly. Clearly, he was blaming Zhu Zhao for weakening the prestige of the Deluo sect. Zhu Xianxian felt that he was wronged and lowered his head slightly. He thought to himself, "Don't you know the power of those 2 sabers? They have already defeated several tribulation stage cultivators. Moreover, if I charge forward, Yu Qianqiu will definitely kill me. I'm afraid that I won't be able to return even if I charge forward. Regardless of Zhu Xinqian's attitude, when the 4 Deluo sect experts in the late tribulation stage appeared, their imposing manner immediately silenced the crowd. The atmosphere was very heavy. No one from the various sects came out to mediate. Yu Qianqiu had gone too far, and even the supporting Immortal Island was too embarrassed to step in. This had completely damaged the Deluo sect's reputation, and no one would be able to stop him. Seeing the 4 people appear, Yu Qianqiu narrowed his eyes slightly. He stabbed his sabers into the ground and cupped his fists. May I know who the 4 of you are from the Deluo sect? Release him. Luo Kun spat out these 2 words in reply. His tone sounded like it was the final warning. The allure beauty behind Yu Qianqiu transmitted her voice. This person is Xiao Chang's master, Luo Kun, a worshipper of the Deluo sect. The other 3 are also worshippers of the Deluo sect. They are all experts in the late tribulation stage. Yu Qianqiu nodded slightly and said expressionlessly, so it's the 4 worshippers of the Deluo sect. I apologize for my lack of manners. The 4 of them immediately knew that someone had transmitted a message to Yu Qianqiu. Their gazes all fell on the 100 Charms beauty. Zhu Zhao shouted, 100 Charms beauty, your demon illusion palace has already been erased from the cultivation world. Why don't you behave yourself? Are you going to get involved in this matter? The allure beauty smiled noncommittally and immediately maintained her silence. Not speaking at this time meant that she was reserving some leeway. Perhaps it would be more advantageous for Yu Qianqiu to act when the opportunity arose. Ze. Yu Qianqiu called out. Ze also understood the seriousness of the situation. She immediately teleported to his side and used her actions to show that she was in the late tribulation stage. The 4 people's pupils shrank slightly as they stared at her. Facing someone who could kill an expert in the late tribulation stage, no one dared to underestimate her. It seems that the 4 seniors of the Deluo sect want to teach us a lesson. I'll leave the 4 seniors to you. You just need to hold them off for a while and I'll deal with the others. At that time, I'll lend you a hand. No problem, right? Yu Qianqiu said indifferently. Yes. Ze nodded heavily. She glanced at the 4 people and took out the purplish-black bamboo. There was an uncontrollable excitement on her face. The various sects sucked in a breath of cold air. It seemed that this madman was going to clash head-on with the Daluo sect. At a time like this, when they were facing off against a foreign enemy, such a large-scale battle would be a loss for the Chinese cultivation world regardless of who won. Quan Deming of Fuxian Island finally couldn't help but shout, everyone, think of the big picture. If there's anything, we can talk it over. Since it has come to this, there's nothing to talk about. Zhu Zhao waved his hand at Quan Deming and shouted, Yu Qianqiu, die. His figure flashed and he struck out with his palm. A huge palm shadow came crashing down. Ze, who was standing at the side, rushed forward and shouted, fight. The purple bamboo in her hand also turned into a huge shadow. With a bang, the shadow of the palm shadow was destroyed. A strong airflow spread out. Damn it. It's that bullsh asterisk T de Luo mountain splitting palm again. Yu Qianqiu cursed in his heart. He thought that by showing off his strength, the other party would have some misgivings. Then, he would be able to talk his way out of this. Who knew that the other party wouldn't just let this matter rest and would rather make it bigger? Since that's the case, what else is there to say? I'm not afraid. Without another word, Yu Qianqiu dragged his saber with both hands and directly split Zhao Chang, who was under his feet, into 2. Then, he pointed his saber forward and shouted, kill. With Yu Qianqiu as an example, the dozen disciples of the Deluo sect were instantly killed on the spot. More than 600 masked men quickly divided into small combat teams and neatly charged into the enemy's group. Luo Kuan and the other two were also shocked. They didn't expect Zhu Xiao to attack just like that. He didn't even greet the three of them. But since the enemy had already launched a large-scale attack, they naturally had to protect their own side first. The three of them quickly exchanged glances and immediately shot up into the sky, rushing into the group of 600 masked loose cultivators. 6 palms flashed and flashed as fast as shadows. Like a gust of wind, the three of them consecutively killed more than 10 people. The dozen screams made Yu Qianzhou's heart skip a beat. He didn't think much of Ze and the late-stage tribulation passing expert, but he didn't expect the late-stage tribulation passing expert to be so terrifying. Killing early-stage tribulation passing experts was as easy as taking something out of one's pocket. Watching the dozen members fall from the sky and die, he immediately shouted, "Don't bother with the three of them. The others are your targets." As soon as these words came out, a few more people fell from the sky. But after hearing this warning, the special forces immediately stopped risking their lives to fight the three. Instead, they pounced into the group of Deluo sect disciples and started a frenzied massacre. Screams rang out everywhere as the Deluo sect disciples fiercely counterattacked. However, as soon as the battle started, the Deluo sect disciples realized that their side had more than 1,000 people, but they didn't seem to have more than 600 people on their side. It seemed as if they were surrounded by masked men in black, and they were being attacked from all directions. Just as they tried to deal with them, a flying sword suddenly pierced through their chest, and they fell to the ground with a look of disbelief on their faces. And when they attacked, the enemy seemed to have people helping them everywhere, so they didn't have to worry about their rear being exposed. As soon as they attacked, someone would immediately deflect their flying sword, and then they would be attacked for no reason. Up in the sky, Luo Kuan and the other two glanced at the scene below and immediately felt their hearts skip a beat. Although the masked men in black could not withstand a single blow from them, they were like hungry wolves charging into a flock of sheep when they charged into the Deluo sect disciples. The Deluo sect disciples had no way of fighting back against the flawless teamwork of the other party. The masked man in black constantly changed the most advantageous formation. His attacks and defenses were balanced as he slaughtered the Deluo sect disciples wantonly, killing them one by one. In an instant, 200 to 300 of the nearly 1,000 Deluo sect disciples fell, and the rest fell into a state of panic and fear. Faced with such a sharp combination of attacks, they were unable to organize an effective attack, and in an instant, blood and flesh flew everywhere. The various sects were dumbfounded, and they looked at each other. They didn't expect the 600 people under Yu Qianzhou to be so powerful. Why did it seem as if every one of them had been through hundreds of battles? In this exchange, the Deluo sect suffered great losses. Both sides of the massacre were from the Cultivation Alliance. The various sects were worried, but they couldn't help either side. Luo Kuan and the other two were stunned for a moment, and another 200 Deluo sect disciples fell. In just a short period of time, almost half of the disciples had lost their lives. How could this be? The three's expressions changed, and without hesitation, they took out their flying swords from their storage bags. Luo Kuan shouted, "You two deal with those loose cultivators, I'll eliminate them." Cui Zhaofan and Li Mengbai quickly flashed to the sky above the battlefield. The flying swords hovering in the air were as fast as lightning, rising and falling towards the masked men in black below. Luo Kuan, on the other hand, glared at Yu Qianzhou. The latter was slightly shocked, and thought to himself, so the so-called elimination was referring to me. Ce. Finish the battle quickly. Kill the opponent and help our brothers get rid of the other two, shouted Yu Qianzhou as he glanced at the Special Forces offensive. With the addition of 2 experts in the final phase of the tribulation passing stage, not only did the special forces suffer more casualties, but their attacking formation was also in chaos. If this continued, the entire team would be wiped out. Zhu Zhao was already in a difficult situation, and Yu Qianzhou's shout was simply asking for his life. Ze immediately unleashed the great art of teleportation to the extreme. The purple bamboo she controlled flickered in and out of sight, appearing and disappearing like a ghost. No matter how hard Zhu Zhao tried, he couldn't get rid of the opponent. It was as if he was possessed by a ghost, and he could only barely defend himself. He felt like his life was hanging by a thread. He anxiously shouted, "Luo Kuan, quickly come and help me." Luo Kuan was about to kill Yu Qianzhou, but when he heard Ziyi's shout, he was immediately shocked. To the sect, losing 1 expert in the final phase of the tribulation passing stage was a great loss. How could they not save him? He immediately teleported over and fought Ziyi with Zhu Zhao's dual swords. Ziyi! Hold on! Yu Qianzhou roared. He turned his head and stared at the 2 experts in the final phase of the tribulation passing stage who were trying to kill the members of the special forces. A ruthless and cruel aura appeared on his face. He threw the broadswords in his hands into his storage bag, and with a flick of his sleeves, black shadows started to appear. The green flying swords that he used to use were now abandoned, and were replaced by black flying swords. Chapter 422. When Yan Bugue brought people to the 100 Flowers Valley to challenge, many people had seen Yu Qianzhou's thousands of green flying swords. They were quite powerful. The strange whip that everyone was helpless against was defeated by his flying swords. Yan Cheng, who was in the middle stage of tribulation passing, was even killed by his flying swords. Now, a black flying sword had appeared. Since he could use it in this battle, it must be even more powerful. Currently, the situation of the battle had been turned around by the 4 experts in the late stage of tribulation passing. Once Cui Zhaofan and Li Mengbai used their flying swords, the 600 masked rogue cultivators immediately suffered heavy losses. As the leader, Yu Qianzhou couldn't wait any longer. Under the watchful eyes of the crowd, thousands of flying swords covered the sky and covered the earth as they wrapped around him and directly pounced towards Cui Zhaofan and Li Mengbai. All the sects were shocked. This guy actually wanted to fight against 2 experts in the late stage of tribulation passing alone. He was a complete lunatic. The people of the supporting Immortal Island had an inseparable affection for Yu Qianzhou. When they saw this scene, they all shook their heads and remained silent. Oh, Sihai even sighed. The good seedling that he had taken a fancy to was probably going to die here. No one thought that Yu Qianzhou could survive the attacks of 2 experts in the late stage of tribulation passing. Bai Shan of the 4 clans turned around and sent a telepathic message. The disciples of the 4 clans quickly gathered and were ready to help as soon as the order was given. Seeing this, all the sects cursed inwardly. The 4 clans were probably going to help Yu Qianzhou. Hua Rui and Hua Yinue of the Moon clan looked at each other and nodded slightly. Their attention was not on Yu Qianzhou, but on the 2 people in purple in the sky. The smile on the Allure Beauty's face disappeared. She raised her hand and stroked her hair. A few experts in the tribulation passing from the pink cult also took a step forward and waited for the order. "I'm coming." Yu Qianzhou roared. The flying swords swirled like snow as he waved his hand. With a flick of his finger, the flying swords pledged their loyalty to him. Hundreds of streaks of black light split into 2 groups and charged towards Li Mengbai and Cui Zhaofan at lightning speed. Yu Qianzhou was throwing caution to the wind. It was impossible for him to let the first batch of brothers who followed him into battle be annihilated. Now that his cultivation had just broken through to the middle stage of nascent soul, his ability to control his flying sword had once again increased. He had to fight with his life on the line. Cui Zhaofan and Li Mengbai had already noticed his movements. Seeing the flying swords flying towards them like rain, they instantly covered their bodies with protective stellar energy. The two of them were confident that with their cultivation, they could completely block Yuchincho's attack. However, the two of them weren't completely at the mercy of the other party's attacks. One of them controlled the flying swords below to slaughter the masked rogue cultivators while the other struck out with a palm. The Daluo mountain-splitting palm of the Daluo sect instantly conjured two giant palm silhouettes to meet the two waves of sword rain. The flying sword was like a sharp arrow, and the palm's shadow was like a bubble. When the two met, it was like a knife cutting through tofu. The palm energy was immediately broken by the flying sword. As expected, it could break through the stellar energy of a late-stage tribulation stage cultivator. Yuchincho was invigorated, and his confidence was greatly boosted. He then controlled the flying sword to rapidly shoot towards the two Daluo sect consecrators. The hundreds of black flying swords that were protecting him also carried him as he charged towards them. Oh no, there's something strange about these swords. Cui Xiaofan cried out involuntarily. They can break through stellar energy. Let's go. Li Mingbai's expression changed. The two of them shouted at the same time. In order not to affect their speed, they instantly retracted their stellar energy and soared into the sky. The two flying swords that had caused the masked rogue cultivators to suffer greatly also immediately flashed into the sky, chasing after their masters. Without the threat of the two late-stage tribulation stage cultivators, the masked rogue cultivators had suffered heavy casualties, and there were only about 400 of them left. However, their long battle experience in Utopia was very effective. They calmly and quickly formed a team to counterattack the Daluo sect. Yuchincho pounced towards the spot where the two late-stage tribulation stage cultivators had been standing. He looked down and saw that the number of casualties had reached a third. He instantly felt as if his heart was being cut by a knife. These were all his efforts over the years. He couldn't help but roar crazily, "Kill! Kill! Kill! Don't leave a single one alive! Kill them all! You two old bastards, where do you think you're going? Give me your lives!" Yuchincho's eyes immediately turned bloodshot. He pointed at the two people flying into the sky and shouted. Then, thousands of black flying swords carried him into the sky and chased after the two late-stage tribulation stage cultivators. The smell of desperation was very strong. When the masked rogue cultivators below saw that their leader had single-handedly defeated the two late-stage tribulation stage cultivators, they were instantly energized. They immediately followed their leader's orders to kill them all and started a frenzied massacre. There was no lack of intention to take revenge for their teammates. The various sects were shocked. Yuchincho had actually scared away the two late-stage tribulation stage cultivators from the Daluo sect. Now, he was flying into the sky alone to continue his pursuit. He was really crazy. Oh my! After this battle, if Yuchincho was still alive, even if he didn't have the cultivation of a late-stage tribulation stage cultivator, he would definitely be ranked among them. Not because of anything else, but because of his strength. After the people of supporting Immortal Island recovered from their shock, they looked at each other and shook their heads with bitter smiles. Now, they understood that supporting Immortal Island had abandoned a disciple with the potential to reach the late-stage tribulation stage. Moreover, he had killed two late-stage tribulation stage cultivators while he was only at the nascent soul stage. Although it was hard to believe, it was the truth. Supporting Immortal Island had suffered a heavy loss. Yuchincho had used the improved Guiyuan sword art to establish his might in the cultivation world several times. Could it be that the tens of thousands of cultivators of supporting Immortal Island were inferior to Yuchincho? The research and improvement of the Guiyuan sword art could not be delayed. The higher-ups of supporting Immortal Island nodded firmly. Bai Shan and the others from the four major clans were also surprised, but they weren't too surprised. The disciple of the world's #1 expert was not someone to be trifled with. Everyone finally heaved a sigh of relief. The Allure Beauty looked at Yu Qianqiu, who was holding a sword and chasing after Yu Qianqiu, and her eyes lit up. She didn't expect such a scene to occur. This guy was really unfathomable and always exceeded her expectations. It seemed that her worries were unnecessary. Ziyi had no problem fighting Zhu Zhao alone. She believed that it wouldn't take long for her to succeed. However, Luo Kuan's participation immediately made Zhu Zhao feel better. It was also impossible for the two of them to defeat Ziyi. Putting aside the fact that Nongzhu had trained her daughter, Nongzhu's famous form displacement transposition technique in the cultivation world was not something that could be practiced for fun. Ziyi and Luo Kuan had a headache because Ziyi didn't fight them head-on. Relying on her strange body movement technique, she appeared and disappeared unpredictably. The two of them could only guard against her, and it was difficult for them to fight back effectively. Ziyi was originally worried about Yu Qianqiu's safety. At this time, when she saw Yu Qianqiu, a nascent soul stage cultivator, chasing after two cultivators at the final stage of the Crossing Calamity stage, she was shocked and attributed all the credit to Bai Changchun. She admired Bai Changchun more and more. She thought that the disciple taught by Senior Bai was really extraordinary. Without any worries for the time being, Ziyi was immediately stimulated by Yu Qianqiu to the point that it was as if she had been injected with chicken blood. She used the great art of displacement transposition perfectly, immediately forcing Luo Kuan and Zhu Zhao into an indescribably miserable state. The two of them had their backs against each other, and only then did they have one side of their defense reduced. Only then did they feel a little more relaxed. However, when they saw that Yu Qianqiu was also fighting one against two, the two of them didn't know what to say. Zhu Zhao was so regretful that his intestines turned green. In order to stand up for his disappointing nephew, he had dragged the entire Deluo sect down with him. Cui Zhaofan and Li Mengbai stopped high in the sky. With their cultivations, Yu Qianqiu naturally couldn't catch up. However, as the two of them were the highest echelons of the Deluo sect, they couldn't do that. If they really did that, the Deluo sect would be too ashamed to show their faces in public. Seeing that the two of them had stopped running and were preparing for battle, Yu Qianqiu also calmed down. He slowed down his speed and quickly set up his formation. Half of the flying swords were inserted outwards, densely distributed around his body, making him look like a hedgehog. He wasn't afraid of anything now, but he was afraid that the two cultivators at the final stage of the Crossing Calamity stage could use teleportation to ambush him. This ability to come and go without a trace was too terrifying. However, teleportation could only be used if there was space for them to move. Without the spatial crack that they used to teleport over, no matter how they tried to teleport, they would only be able to stop outside of his sword formation. After setting up his formation, Yu Qianqiu immediately felt more at ease. As long as he had a bit of buffer time, escaping would not be a problem. He immediately shouted, "Hand over your life." Yu Qianqiu commanded the remaining hundreds of flying swords to charge at the two of them. This guy kept asking the two of them to hand over their lives. The cultivators below were not deaf. Cui Zhaofan and Li Mingbai's faces turned ashen. They were probably angry out of humiliation. Cui Zhaofan stared at the pursuing Yu Qianqiu and sneered, "You really don't know the immensity of heaven and earth. If you want to die, don't blame me for being impolite." With a point of his finger, the flying sword that was floating beside him moved according to his heart's desire. It spun in the air and suddenly created an illusionary shadow of a sword intent. The entire sword seemed to have expanded by 12 times. With a whoosh, it pierced through the air. Its strong momentum caused visible ripples to form in the air as it charged straight at Yu Qianqiu. His attack when he was enraged was indeed extraordinary. Oh my! The final stage of the Crossing Calamity stage is indeed the final stage of the Crossing Calamity stage. Black fire flying sword, I will be relying on you to gain face. Don't let me down. Yu Qianqiu made up his mind and pointed his finger at the sky as well. He shouted, "Kill!" 100 black rays flashed out and twisted into a flood dragon that soared into the sky. It wanted to compete with the heavens. It soared into the sky and faced the huge flying sword that was creating a huge ripple. The various sects below raised their heads and squinted their eyes to watch. They were speechless. It was hard to tell if Cui Xiaofan's profound cultivation had the upper hand or if Yu Qianqiu's black flying sword was sharper. Li Mengbai looked over with a solemn expression. It was really strange that the flying sword could break through stellar qi. If there was an accident, he did not mind being the laughing stock of two cultivators at the end of the tribulation passing stage fighting against a nascent soul cultivator. The Doluo sect disciples below had almost all died. Only the tribulation passing stage cultivators were barely holding on. It seemed like they would not be able to hold on for much longer. None of the four of them could bear the crime of being completely wiped out. Moreover, Luo Kuan and Zhu Zhao were also barely holding on. He raised his hand and the flying sword beside him landed in his hand. He then clenched it tightly. As soon as the gigantic flying sword collided with the dense black sword shadows, the dense black shadows immediately disappeared into the gigantic sword, making an ear-piercing si sound. Cui Xiaofan, who was mentally connected to his flying sword, had a change of expression. The huge sword was instantly shattered. It could no longer withstand such a huge force. With a loud bang, it exploded into pieces in the air. Chapter 423. The black netherworld fire that even Old Man Bai could not break through was indeed extraordinary. It destroyed the flying swords of the late-stage tribulation transcendence cultivators. Yu Qianqiu was very pleased. He immediately charged up while facing the flying swords. His aura was very arrogant. Li Mengbai snorted coldly. She waved her sword and a sharp light shot out. She then quickly slashed out more than 10 times. F***ck. Yu Qianqiu, who was rushing up, was instantly shocked. He realized that he was a little too excited. He only dreamed of defeating the late-stage tribulation transcendence cultivators, but he might lose his life if he was not careful. He moved his sword horizontally, controlling hundreds of flying swords to meet the other's sharp sword light. The black flame flying swords were indeed powerful. Pu, they instantly destroyed more than 10 sharp sword lights. Yu Qianqiu's heart was beating rapidly. Just as he heaved a sigh of relief, he suddenly realized that Li Mengbai had disappeared from above. He saw a shadow appear from the corner of his eyes. The word teleportation immediately appeared in his mind. He was shocked again and hurriedly flew up on his sword. Running. Li Mengbai snorted coldly and shouted, "Stop him. Don't let him escape." Cui Xiaofan's expression darkened. He summoned another sword. The sword from before could be considered a transcendent artifact, but it was destroyed just like that. Although he could not control so many flying swords at the same time like Yu Qianqiu, he could still take out a few spare flying swords from his storage pouch. With the previous lesson, he had learned his lesson. He no longer used his flying swords to fight against Yu Qianqiu. Just like Li Mengbai, he shot out a sword light every time he attacked. The two of them, one above the other, shot out a sword light while the other shot out a sword light. Immediately, Yu Qianqiu was forced into a corner. The two of them watched as he used his flying swords to surround himself like a porcupine. Such a strange arrangement. If it wasn't to guard against the two's teleportation, what else could it be? Since he had the confidence to use these flying swords to defend himself, there must be a reason. The two of them did not force their way through, but the sword lights they shot out became more and more frequent. If this continued, there would come a time when Yu Qianqiu would fail to block it. Of course, Yu Qianqiu wouldn't just sit there and wait to be beaten. He had plenty of flying swords anyway, and it was enough for each person to use a dozen or so to harass them. However, the speed of his flying swords couldn't keep up with the speed of the two people moving through the air. It was true that he could only harass them, but he couldn't cause any damage to them. Just like that, the three of them began to drag it out. You release sword light to harass me, I release flying swords to harass you. However, at this rate, with Yu Qinzhou's cultivation, he might not be able to last as long as the two of them. However, Li Mengbai and Cui Zhaofan were feeling extremely anxious. There weren't many Deluo sect disciples left. If this were to continue, all of them would die. If Yu Qinzhou's subordinates were to kill all of them, they would be too ashamed to return to the Deluo sect. However, this Yu Qinzhou was like a porcupine, making it impossible for them to exert any force. No matter how high their cultivation was, they had to find a way to attack. Attacking with flying swords was impossible. The other party had as many flying swords as there were hairs on a cow, and all of them were terrifyingly sharp. They could cut through transcendent artifacts like vegetables, and even their astral energy and sword light could be disintegrated. Teleportation was also impossible to get close to, so there was no way to find an effective way to attack. It was hard to imagine how a single person could have so many sharp flying swords on him. It was simply illogical. The various sects below watched as the Deluo sect disciples were almost completely wiped out. The few dozen mid-stage Tribulation Transcendence disciples were clenching their teeth and holding on, but under the combined attacks of the other party, they didn't dare to go all out. However, they had gained some experience. Against this group of masked rogue cultivators, the only thing they could do was to stick together and defend. If they tried to retaliate too much, the other party would immediately take advantage of them. Below them, there were many people with low cultivation, and very few people with high cultivation. The various sects looked up and saw that the situation was completely reversed. There were many people with high cultivation, and very few people with low cultivation. Two late-stage Tribulation Transcendence cultivators took turns to trap Yu Qianzhou and attacked fiercely, but they couldn't do anything to him. All right. On the other side, Ze was even better. She was fighting with fewer people against more people. One late-stage Tribulation Transcendence cultivator was actually trapping two late-stage Tribulation Transcendence cultivators, and Luo Kun and Zhu Zhao could only defend themselves. What made the various sects the most speechless was that Yu Qianzhou was obviously only at the nascent soul stage. He even needed to step on a sword to fly. Yet, he was fighting with two late-stage Tribulation Transcendence cultivators. This completely overturned everyone's perception. However, everyone could see that it wasn't that Cui Zhaofan and Li Mengbai weren't Yu Qianzhou's opponents. It was all because the black flying swords were too powerful, and the two of them were afraid to attack. If Yu Qianzhou dared to abandon the black flying swords, either one of them would be able to kill him with a single slap. How could they let him jump around in the sky for so long? It was time-consuming and embarrassing. Keep an eye on him. I'll go deal with the rogue cultivators below, Li Mengbai said to Cui Zhaofan. She felt that there was no need to waste the two of them here. Even if there was only one of them, they wouldn't be able to do anything to each other. It would be a waste for her to waste time here. When Yu Qianzhou heard this, he was shocked. If that guy went down, no one in the special forces would be able to resist him. If they fought head-on, none of them would be a match for a late-stage Tribulation Transcendence cultivator. He immediately shouted, "Nebula Water Art." He casually came up with a frightening name. As expected, it caused the two of them to be shocked at the same time. They instantly thought that this guy seemed to have two special skills that he hadn't used yet. They immediately became vigilant. Neither of them left. The Nebula Fire Art was a famous name that the entire cultivation world had heard of. It was said that no one had been able to gain an advantage over that fire art. When Luo Qingtian returned to the Luo sect after he was injured, he once told the higher-ups of the Luo sect that Yu Qianzhou's fire art was extremely overbearing. Once he came into contact with it, he wouldn't be able to withstand it even if he hid within his protective qi. He was forced to self-destruct his protective qi to escape. As for the nebula water art, this was the first time they had heard of it. However, it was an indisputable fact that Yu Qianzhou could indeed control water to fight. Even though he had only used it once, many people had witnessed it with their own eyes. Moreover, the only time it was used was when the Daluo sect master, Luo Qingtian, tried it. Luo Qingtian tasted Yu Qianzhou's water and fire's secret arts alone, and no one knew if it was a blessing or a curse. Now that the nebula water art had suddenly appeared, not only did it cause Li Mengbai and Cui Zhaofan to become vigilant, even the various sects below them became interested. Everyone knew that the duel between Yu Qianzhou and Luo Qingtian was on the river that day, so it was needless to say that there was water. Could it be that the water conjuration art could appear out of thin air like the fire conjuration art? Everyone subconsciously looked at the vast sea not far away. Yu Qianzhou stuffed 2 big handfuls of qi-replenishing pills into his mouth and chewed them like candy. In the end, the sects waited for a long time, but they didn't find anything unusual. The people above them were still hammering away, hitting each other. They couldn't hit each other, and neither could they hit each other. However, 2 more screams came from below. 2 Daluo sect disciples had made a mistake, and the masked loose cultivator took advantage of the gap and killed them on the spot. Li Mengbai and Cui Zhaofan's expressions changed at the same time. The latter said to the former in a low voice, "This guy is stalling for time. You go down there, leave this to me." Li Mengbai fiercely slashed out a sword ray. Just as she was about to go down, she suddenly realized that something was wrong with her surroundings. It was slightly hazy, and the air instantly became abnormally moist. The 2 of them said at the same time, "Nebula water art." The moment these words came out, it immediately attracted the attention of the various sects below. Instantly, their eyes widened like eggs, and their heads tilted up and down for a long time. However, they couldn't find a single drop of water. Are our eyes playing tricks on us, or are those 2 guys hallucinating? The various sects looked at each other, and all shook their heads to indicate that they didn't see anything. Li Mengbai and Cui Zhaofan's nerves tensed up for a long time. They realized that the surrounding air was indeed moist, but there was no water. The 2 of them simultaneously stared at Yu Qianzhou, only to see that this guy had a serious expression on his face. He was completely focused on dealing with the sword rays that the 2 of them had released. The 2 of them immediately felt like they had been tricked. Cui Zhaofan gritted his teeth and said, "Go. A mere water art won't be able to do anything to me. Yu Qianzhou, wait for me to kill all of them down there, then I'll deal with." Li Mengbai's words came to an abrupt halt. Yu Qianzhou clenched his fists, and immediately, a few water dragons coiled around his arms, swimming around in the air. Yu Qianzhou also knew that he could only drag things out for a while, but not forever. It was time to give it his all. Old Man Bai had once said that if one used it well, they would be invincible. He then shouted, "Then I'll let you see my nebula water art." With a shake of his arms, boundless water surged out, and the air instantly became bright. Li Mengbai and Cui Zhaofan realized that they were instantly trapped in the water, and the water was desperately trying to enter their orifices. The 2 of them were shocked, and immediately released their stellar energy to protect their bodies. The various sects below were in an uproar. A large area of water had really appeared out of nowhere, covering a radius of a few hundred meters. Everyone had originally thought that he was going to borrow the water of the Eastern Sea. Yu Qianzhou was in the water, and immediately realized the beauty of this technique. It was as if the radius of a few hundred meters was under his control. Even if he closed his eyes, he would be able to clearly see the actions of his 2 opponents. It seemed like the benefits of having a higher cultivation level were not small. This was wonderful. Yu Qianqiu chuckled, and the surrounding water quickly became turbulent. Li Mengbai and Cui Zhaofan immediately realized that they could not see the movements around them at all. They instantly felt that something was wrong, and quickly released their divine senses. Ah! The moment the two of them released their divine senses, they immediately felt as if they were being pierced by a group of things. The feedback was not a piercing pain, but an unforgettable burning pain. The pain penetrated into their souls, and no matter how high their cultivation levels were, they could not help but let out a miserable howl. The people below were also unable to see the movements above them because of the turbulence of the water. Suddenly, they heard two miserable howls, and immediately determined that it was Cui Zhaofan and Li Mengbai. Everyone was shocked. Could it be that Yu Qianqiu had already succeeded? Luo Kun and Zhu Zhao clenched their teeth and defended with all their might. When they suddenly heard these two miserable howls, they immediately felt their limbs go numb. The two of them could naturally tell whose voice it was. For a cultivator at the final stage of the tribulation to let out such a miserable howl, the result was unimaginable. Immediately, the two of them relaxed their defense. Hearing this, Ziyi became even more excited, and took the opportunity to attack ferociously. Zhu Zhao was careless for a moment, and the bamboo immediately pierced a hole through his thigh. Just as blood spurted out, he circulated his energy to stop it. Zhu Zhao was really stubborn. He was afraid that he would affect Luo Kun, so he forcefully endured and did not make a sound. Instead, he became even more alert and defended with all his might. Outsiders might not know what was going on over at Yu Qianqiu's side, but he knew that Cui Zhaofan and Li Mengbai's divine senses had already been severely injured by his black flame flying swords. This time, it was not like the time when he fought with Luo Qingtian, where he only used a finger of black flame to lightly touch them. Instead, hundreds of flying swords rushed into their divine senses and messed them up. It was definitely enough to make them suffer. Seizing the opportunity, hundreds of flying swords shot towards the two of them. However, since Cui Zhaofan and Li Mengbai could cultivate to the final stage of the tribulation, they were not to be trifled with. How could they hesitate after suffering such an attack? Almost at the same time, they instinctively exploded their protective auras. Boom, boom. Two loud sounds rang out like thunder. The water clouds within a radius of a few hundred meters in the sky exploded. Yu Qianqiu immediately felt dizzy from such a loud sound. The water clouds lost control and all turned into flowing water, splashing into the sea. Yu Qianqiu shook his head and regained his senses. His ears were still ringing, but he immediately realized that the two of them were staring at him like tigers watching their prey. He was immediately shocked, and quickly summoned back the black flame flying swords to protect himself. However, what surprised him was that the two of them were staring at him with pale faces, but they did not make any movements. Yu Qianqiu's face was filled with suspicion, but he did not dare to act rashly. He did not know what the two of them were up to. Moreover, his ears were still ringing, so it was better for him to slow down. Cui Zhaofan and Li Mengbai, on the other hand, were suffering in silence. Their divine senses had been severely damaged. Other than their natal primordial spirits, the divine senses that could be released had already been destroyed by Yu Qianqiu. The remaining divine senses were pitifully little, and they had almost become idiots due to the damage to their divine senses. Now, the two of them were extremely mentally exhausted, and they were almost in a state of drowsiness. How could they still have the energy to continue wasting time with Yu Qianqiu? This symptom made the two of them recall what Luo Qingtian had said. Back when he was fighting with Yu Qianqiu, his divine sense was suddenly injured. Although the injury wasn't serious, that kind of heart-wrenching pain was simply unforgettable. It almost made people want to die instantly. Now that he thought about it, the symptoms were exactly the same as what Luo Qingtian had said. It was just that the degree of damage to their divine senses was much more severe than Luo Qingtian's. The three of them continued wasting time in the air. Li Mengbai and Cui Zhaofan took the opportunity to rest, hoping to recover some of the damaged divine senses. Yu Qianqiu, on the other hand, was used to scheming against others. He was suspicious and afraid that others would scheme against him, so he decided to observe first. He did not want to act rashly. Because of his suspicious nature, he had lost a great opportunity for nothing. The spectators below were puzzled. The battle had already reached this stage, so what was there to hesitate about? They were not going to persuade him anymore. Just end the battle quickly and end it quickly. What was the point of continuing to waste time? At this moment, a few disciples ran over from the small town. They quickly went to the spectators' sects and reported something to the people in charge. The expressions of the people in charge of the Righteous Path's Fuxian Island, Moon Clan, Sword Clan, and Heartless Palace all changed. They looked at Yu Qianqiu, Li Mengbai, and the others who were in a stalemate in the air. The people of the four sects exchanged glances and nodded. They shouted in unison, "Stop!" As soon as they shouted, more than 10 experts in the final stage of the Tribulation Realm shot out from the four sects and blocked between Yu Qianqiu and the other two. Yu Qianqiu quickly looked around and squinted his eyes. He said in an extremely cold tone, "What? Could it be that the Righteous Path is colluding to deal with me?" Chapter 424. The movement of the righteous immediately alerted the demonic sections. Although they were all in the Cultivation Alliance, there was still a division between righteous and demonic sections. It was best if they didn't suffer any losses. There was no need to say anything. The demonic sects exchanged glances, and a dozen late-stage tribulation-passing experts soared into the sky. The righteous sects, including Daluo's sect, had 5 sections. The demonic sects also had 5 sections. They stood in the sky. Nyosan of 10,000 demons said expressionlessly, "The matter of Yu Qianqiu and Daluo's sect has troubled you all. Lu Qing, what is the meaning of this?" Lu Qing was the consecrator of Fuxian Island. He waved his hand and said, "Nyosan, don't misunderstand. Daluo's sect sent a message to the 4 sects, asking us to stop this fight. We just received the sect master's decree, and we don't have any other intentions." The demonic sects didn't say anything. They believed this. Daluo's sect must have noticed that the situation was bad and sent a message back to the sect. They didn't stop it at first, probably thinking that they would gain an advantage. Who knew that they would be at a disadvantage? Daluo's sect couldn't send people over, so they sent a message to the 4 sects, asking them to send a decree to the people in Wanghai town. "Why didn't you stop it earlier? Why now?" Yu Qianqiu sneered. He was a smart person, and could see through the trick at a glance. "We don't know about that. After receiving the decree from the sect, we immediately came here," Lu Qing said. Nyosan sized up Li Mengbai and Cui Zhaofan. Suddenly, he looked at Yu Qianqiu with a strange expression. He thought to himself, "Those two are clearly showing signs of exhaustion. I'm afraid it will be difficult for them to make a move. This brat is famous for not being at a disadvantage. Why would he give up such a great opportunity? Strange." He didn't think about it. With Yu Qianqiu's current cultivation, he couldn't see through the late-stage tribulation-passing experts. Otherwise, he wouldn't be so lucky. He would definitely pounce on them and slaughter them. After the group of cultivators at the end of the Tribulation Transcendent stage looked at Li Mengbai and Cui Zhaofan, they seemed to be deep in thought. They all stared at Yu Qianqiu in silence. No one had revealed the truth. It all depended on Yu Qianqiu's decision. Yu Qianqiu was in the middle of a group of people at the end of the Tribulation Transcendent stage. When he saw everyone looking at him with a strange expression, Yu Qianqiu immediately felt the pressure on him increase. He looked at Purple Dress and realized that it would be difficult for him to succeed in a short period of time. It was the same for the special forces below. Since none of you are speaking, then let's just waste time. Yu Qianqiu was on high alert. In any case, Purple Dress and the special battle team below them had the upper hand. If he could buy more time, he might be able to kill a few of them. It would be even better if he could kill one at the end of the tribulation stage. He wanted to waste time, but the righteous sects did not want to waste time with him. Everyone had come under the sect leader's decree. Afterwards, they would have to report the completion of the task. Lu Qing of Supporting Immortal Island said, Yu Qianqiu, tell your people to stop. Now is the time to unite against the outsiders. Why must you kill them all? Isn't it better to save energy to deal with the outsiders? With so many powerful people gathered, Yu Qianqiu knew that he could not delay any longer. He curled his lips unwillingly and said, tell the people from Daluo sect to stop first. Once they stop, my people will naturally stop as well. Lu Qing looked down and frowned. He said, the people from Daluo sect are defending, and your people are attacking. How can you tell the people from Daluo sect to stop first? If they stop, isn't it the same as seeking death? Yu Qianqiu was stunned. He looked down and realized that it was indeed the case. If the people from Daluo sect stopped, the special battle team would instantly slaughter them all. He thought that it was a pity, but there was nothing he could do about it. There was a group of powerful people here. Then, he shouted, Purple Dress, come back, stop fighting. When Purple Dress heard this, she immediately recalled her purple bamboo and teleported to Yu Qianqiu's side. She said with a surprised expression, why are you stopping? Give me another half an hour and I'll definitely kill those two. She didn't look like she was satisfied with the fight. The various sects were speechless. They did not expect this woman to be so belligerent. Yu Qianqiu said, go back down. Z-Dress had no choice but to follow him back to the ground. Stop attacking and prepare for battle. With Yu Qianqiu's order, even if the special battle team had doubts, they would not ask them out loud like Z-Dress. They immediately teleported back, but they were still on guard. The people from Daluo sect were also huddled together, not daring to relax. Clearly, they were afraid of being beaten up. The people from the various sects in the final phase of Tribulation Transcendence also teleported down. They stood between the two sides to prevent them from accidentally fighting again. Luo Kun and Zhu Zhao carried Cui Zhaofan and Li Mengbai back to Daluo sect's side. Luo Kun said in a low voice, stop fighting. Only then did the people from Daluo sect believe that it was over. They all relaxed as if they had just survived a disaster. Especially Zhu Xianxian, who was hiding in the middle of a few dozen people. He was still in shock. Of all the people in the early phase of Tribulation Transcendence, he was the only one who survived. Fortunately, a group of people had been protecting him for Zhu Zhao's sake. The Allure Beauty leisurely walked over. Suddenly, she noticed that Yu Qianqiu was gritting his teeth. She could not help but ask, what's wrong? I was tricked. Yu Qianqiu stared at the pale-faced Cui Zhaofan and Li Mengbai who were being supported by two disciples. Only now did he realize that those two fellows had already reached such a stage. Just now, they were barely holding on, but he had wasted such a good opportunity. Now that he understood, he was so angry that he almost vomited blood. This was too vexing. The people in the final phase of Tribulation Transcendence in the middle naturally understood what he meant, but they all pretended as if nothing had happened. In their hearts, they were also sighing at how lucky Cui Zhaofan and Li Mengbai were. To be able to survive this guy's attack was truly a miracle. The Luo sect, please return first. Lu Qing cupped his hands at Luo Kun. Luo Kun's face was ashen as he returned the greeting. Then, he ordered his disciples to collect the corpses of the dead disciples. Not long after, there were only 200 corpses of the special forces left on the plaza. When the people in the final phase of Tribulation Transcendence saw Yu Qianqiu staring at the corpses on the ground with twitching expressions, they exchanged glances and silently dispersed. There was nothing left for them to do here. The 400 or so special forces who were still alive remained silent. Ziyi's face was also filled with solemnity. The Allure Beauty's gaze shifted to Yu Qianqiu. Seeing that his face was flushed red, and the veins on his neck could already be seen bulging, it was clear that he was extremely angry. "Collect the corpses of our brothers onto the fourth flying artifact," Yu Qianqiu said word by word. The special forces dispersed. They silently picked up their comrades and quietly sent them onto the fourth flying artifact. The onlookers from the various sects looked at these masked rogue cultivators with admiration. Although there were only about 400 people left, almost all of them had died at the hands of the two cultivators in the final phase of Tribulation Transcendence. The Doluo sect had more than 1,000 people, and many of them were in the Tribulation Transcendence stage. However, almost all of them had been killed by these people, leaving only a few dozen alive. Yu Qianqiu silently walked toward the fourth flying artifact. Ziyi and the Allure Beauty followed behind him. However, when they were about to reach the cabin door, a group of masked rogue cultivators suddenly blocked their way, separating the two women from Yu Qianqiu. Yu Qianqiu didn't even turn his head, as if he didn't know anything. He walked in without even looking back. Only the two captains followed him in, and then the cabin door immediately closed. "Why did you stop us?" The Allure Beauty looked at the group of masked people in front of her and asked. "The Mr. wants to send the dead brothers home." "Please don't disturb him," the person in front said indifferently. The Allure Beauty and Ziyi looked at each other, their faces filled with confusion. Inside the cabin, Yu Qianqiu looked at the over 200 corpses on the cabin's board without any expression on his face. He extended his palm and said indifferently, "Go back. Go back to Utopia and rest in peace. I will use the entire Doluo sect as a sacrifice for you." He didn't say anything else. He released his divine senses, and the over 200 corpses instantly disappeared. In Utopia's military camp, after Guan Yu received the notice, he had already gathered everyone. Close to 10,000 people were waiting quietly. When over 200 corpses appeared, Guan Yu waved his hand, and a group of people came out. They silently removed the masked robes with the words "Rogue Cultivator" embroidered on them and helped them change into Utopia's attire. Everyone bowed silently. After bowing, Guan Yu shouted, "Hong Qi, Zhang Peng, and Gu Qingyun, step forward." After the three of them came to the other side, he continued, "These 200 Special Forces members were sacrificed in an intense battle outside. The leader has specially requested for the three of you to personally give them a proper burial. Can you do it?" "Yes," the three of them said in unison. Guan Yu waved his hand. "Carry it out immediately." Yu Qianqiu and the two team leaders were silent for a long time before they opened the cabin door and walked out. When they saw everyone again, they had already regained their composure. After putting away the two flying artifacts, they ordered all the team members to return to the remaining four. "I'm going back," the Allure Beauty suddenly said to the two of them with a smile. Yu Qianqiu and Ziyi looked at each other and asked in surprise, "Go back where?" "I can't help you much even if I stay by your side." "Of course, I have to go back," the Allure Beauty said and nodded to the two of them. Then, she turned around and left. Her smile was slightly bitter. She originally thought that she would be of great help if she stayed by Yu Qianqiu's side. However, during the battle just now, she realized that Ziyi could not only fight against two cultivators in the late stage of the Crossing Calamity stage, but even Yu Qianqiu could fight against two cultivators in the late stage of the Crossing Calamity stage alone. She immediately realized to her dismay that she was so useless. The members of the Pink sect, who were not far away, quickly came to her. When they were a few meters away from her, they all bowed and said, "Greetings, sect leader." The Allure Beauty raised her hand to indicate that there was no need to be so polite. Then, she turned around and smiled at the two of them. Then, she left under the welcome of the pink sect members. Ze was surprised and said, "Isn't she the palace master of the illusion palace that was wiped out? How did she become the sect leader? It's called the west side is bright when the east side is dark." "You don't understand," Yu Qianqiu replied casually. He didn't think that the Enchantress of 100 Charm would announce his identity so openly. Ziyi's pretty face immediately turned cold when she heard him say that she didn't understand. The onlookers were shocked. They did not expect the Allure Beauty to be the sect leader of the Pink Sect, which was ranked 10th in the demonic path. Then, many people from the various sects left quickly. Obviously, they were in a hurry to report this important news to their sections. Soon, a disciple of the supporting Immortals Island flew over on his sword. He bowed to Yu Qianqiu and said, "Sir, the Cultivation Alliance has something to discuss. Please go there quickly." From the way he looked at Yu Qianqiu, it could be seen that he had already regarded Yu Qianqiu as an extraordinary figure. After all, Yu Qianqiu was an expert who could defeat two experts at the end of the Crossing Calamity stage by himself. And he was from the supporting Immortals Island. "Do you know what it is?" Yu Qianqiu asked. The disciple replied honestly, "It seems to be a discussion about attacking Wuji Island." "I don't know the specifics." Yu Qianqiu frowned and waved his hand. "Lead the way." A flying sword flew out of his sleeve and carried him. The disciple hurriedly led the two of them into the town on his flying sword. From the sky, the three of them entered the largest house in Wanghai town. It was probably the house of a rich family. The back garden was very spacious, and there were already many people there. As soon as Yu Qianqiu arrived, everyone's eyes focused on him. The previous battle had already qualified him to be on equal footing with everyone present. Yu Qianqiu's eyes met with Luo Kuan's from the Daluo sect. The two of them looked at each other and looked away. However, Yu Qianqiu stared at Zhu Xianxian for a while, which made the latter feel a little creeped out. A familiar body fragrance assailed his nose. Yu Qianqiu turned his head and was shocked to find Allure Beauty beside him. She was smiling at him without saying a word. He immediately remembered that she was now the leader of the Pink Sect. Naturally, she was qualified to be here. Ze saw Allure Beauty and approached her happily. After the various sects whispered to each other, they all nodded at Quan Deming from the supporting Immortals Island. Quan Deming stood up and cupped his hands. "Everyone, we were prepared to attack Wuji Island and wipe them out in one fell swoop. Now, reinforcements from Wuji Island are still rushing over. If we wait any longer, it will be even more disadvantageous for us. After asking for the opinions of the various sects, we felt that it was urgent. Now, we have gathered everyone here to ask if there are any objections. There is nothing wrong with going according to the previous arrangements, but..." When Zhongping from the Blood Demon Palace walked out and said, "There is an accident now. Almost all the disciples from the Daluo sect were killed. It is indeed inappropriate to go according to the previous arrangements." Zhu Xianxian immediately replied, "You don't have to worry about that. Our sect's disciples are already on the way. They will arrive before sunrise tomorrow." Some of the smaller sects were secretly shocked. The large sects were indeed large sections. They lost so many people, and they made up for it just like that. Hee. That is naturally good. However, there is something that I need Elder Zhu to explain, Wen Zhongping said with a smile. Humph. What do I need to explain to you? Zhu Xianxian said disdainfully. One was the second largest sect of the righteous path, and the other was the second largest sect of the demonic path. It was just like the supporting Immortals Island and the 10,000 demons. When they met their corresponding opponents, they would fight each other to determine who was better. It had almost become a habit. When Zhongping walked up to him and said with a smile, "Previously, many sects listened to Elder Zhu's opinion and gathered more than 60 million superior-grade spirit stones. Now that we don't have the people and we can't get the money back, Elder Zhu has to give us an explanation. 60 million superior-grade spirit stones is not a small number. When Zhongping, why are you bringing this up now? No one is forcing your blood demon palace to hand over the money. Why are you asking me for an explanation? What nonsense." As Zhu Xianxian argued, he subconsciously glanced at Yu Qianzhou. Yu Qianzhou naturally understood what was going on with the 60 million, but he obediently stood to the side and turned a deaf ear to Zhu Xianxian's words. The eyes of the sects that had paid up immediately lit up. At this point, which sect would dare ask Yu Qianzhou for money or manpower? Everyone was already prepared for misfortune. However, if they took advantage of the Deluo sect's weakness and used Yu Qianzhou's presence to force the Deluo sect to cough up the money, wouldn't that be even better? That's right. Elder Zhu, you were the one who suggested it, and we raised the money according to your suggestion. Now, you should at least say something about giving us people or returning our money. You can't let us lose both our people and our money. Yuan Jiukue of the Hexapath Demon sect stepped forward. Walking up to Wen Zhongping's side, the two exchanged a smile. Wen Zhongping cupped his hands and said, "Old brother Yuan's words are reasonable. You should at least give us an explanation." "That's right. You should at least give us an explanation." At least 5 or 6 sects joined in on the commotion, most of them from the demonic path. Even if the righteous path wanted to take back the money, they had no choice but to swallow their anger. After all, they were all from the righteous path, and as long as the demonic path caused a ruckus, they would definitely get their money back. Luo Kun was resting with his eyes closed, but from the twitching of his cheeks, it was clear that he wasn't calm at all. Zhu Xianxian pointed at the two of them and said angrily, "At that time, were the two of you fighting for more money and trying to get more people? Now you're asking me for an explanation. Go find whoever took the money. Go find whoever has the hostage. Go find whoever has him." What a glib tongue. You're able to push the blame away so quickly. When Zhongping sneered, "Your Deluo sect killed more than 200 people. Who are we going to ask for the people? Are we going to ask the legendary emperor of the Netherworld? We don't have the ability to find him. Why don't you go ask him for us?" Everyone deliberately avoided Yu Qianzhou because they wanted to drag the Deluo sect into this. Zhu Xianxian suddenly shouted, "The people are Yu Qianzhou's men, and the money is also Yu Qianzhou's. Go find him if you have the ability." Everyone was silent. They didn't expect him to be so unafraid of pressure and drag Yu Qianzhou into this at this time. Everyone stared at Yu Qianzhou. As expected, Yu Qianzhou's eyelids slowly opened, and he stared at Zhu Xianxian, surnamed Zhu. "What money did I take from you? Who do I have in my hands? Are you purposely picking a fight with me again? Do you really think that I won't dare to kill you because there are so many people here?" Zhu Xianxian looked at Luo Kun, who was staring at him, and he felt sad. He knew that after this matter, he probably wouldn't be able to be the external manager of the Deluo sect anymore. He decided to say, "Yu Qianzhou, to tell you the truth, the Cultivation Alliance's decree to summon 600 itinerant cultivators and pay more than 60 million upper-grade spirit stones was actually pooled together by the sections. The purpose was to divide the 600 tribulation stage cultivators." The sects were speechless. When Zhongping and Yuan Jiukue's expressions twitched, they knew that things were not going well. Yu Qianzhou chuckled, looked around at everyone, and said, "So there is such a thing. This is the first time I've heard of it. I don't know which sects paid to divide up my people. Why don't you all come out? I want to see who is scheming against me behind my back." He said it was the first time he had heard of it, but who would believe him? The sects that were making a ruckus just now all turned their heads to the side, as if they had never heard of it before. The people from Supporting Immortal Island looked at this disciple from Supporting Immortal Island, and they found it hard to describe. Chapter 425. One person intimidated the Cultivation Alliance. It wasn't that the sects were afraid of him, but at least no one dared to openly oppose him. Strength determined status, this was something that everyone was well aware of. If Yu Qianzhou's side had lost the previous battle, the sects would have forced him to cough up 60 million spirit stones, and that would have been a light punishment. There were probably a lot of people who wanted to get rid of him. Yu Qianzhou, it's not like anyone is scheming against you. Everyone is willing to fork out money because they want some benefits. Otherwise, the sects wouldn't throw away the spirit stones they've worked so hard to save. But you've also suffered heavy losses. We're all members of the Cultivation Alliance, so it's not right to ask for anything from you. Forget it, the Blood Demon Palace won't bring this up again. When Zhongping waved his hand generously and returned to the Blood Demon Palace's side as if nothing had happened. Hearing this, Zhu Xianxian was so angry that he nearly crushed his own teeth. Did the Daluo sect not suffer heavy losses? Did the Daluo sect not belong to the Alliance of Cultivators? Did the Daluo sect have to ask for something from the Alliance of Cultivators? He was angry, but he also understood that in the cultivation world, there were always superfluous things. Sending help in a snowy weather was nonsense. As long as there were benefits to be gained, there would be endless cases of people taking advantage of the situation. If it were someone else, the Daluo sect would have done the same. In the cultivation world, not protecting one's own interests was the same as cutting off one's own path to survival. The Blood Demon Palace has already set an example. Can the Hexapath Demon sect still be a villain? Yuan Jokue laughed and walked back, waving his hand as he walked. This matter is over. The other sects didn't say anything either. It was as if doing something like this was normal. No one would feel embarrassed. In the grand scheme of things, it wasn't for personal benefits. They were fighting for the entire sect. What was there to be embarrassed about? Luo Kuan's face was ashen. Everyone in the Daluo sect was silent, having experienced the fickleness of the world. As the second largest sect of the righteous path, once they lost their power, they were still worthless. None of them were good. Yu Qianzhou sneered. Quan Deming of the Supporting Immortal Island coughed and looked around at the crowd. Since there are no other opinions, when the reinforcements from the Daluo sect arrive tomorrow, the 263 sects of the Cultivation Alliance will coordinate according to the original plan and strive to annihilate the Wuji Island in one fell swoop, eliminating a major threat to the Chinese cultivation world. While everyone was nodding in agreement, someone suddenly said, Elder Quan, if the foreign cultivators of the Limitless Island are defeated, it's more likely that they will flee to the south. My sword sect leads the 36 sects, and we defend the south. Although there are many people in the 36 sects, there aren't many people with profound cultivation bases. In order to prevent any accidents, how about this? Wasn't Yu Qianzhou and the other rogue cultivators not included in the original plan? Why don't you coordinate with us to guard the south as well? This way, I'm sure it'll be much safer. When everyone heard this, they looked over and saw Duan Tianbo of the sword sect making his plans. Only then did everyone remember that the combat strength of Yu Qianzhou's subordinates was obvious to all. They were extremely powerful. As long as the other side didn't send a late-stage tribulation passing expert, the remaining 400 people should have no problem dealing with 1,000 or 2,000 people. His words woke everyone up from their dreams, and the various sects immediately became active. The sword sect, which was ranked fourth among the righteous sects, had jumped out. How could the Hexapath demonic sect, which was ranked fourth among the demonic sects, let it play a one-man show? Putting the demonic sect's face aside, they couldn't let go of such a great benefit. Yuan Jokue chuckled and said, Duan Tianbua, you're wrong. In my opinion, the Wuji Island is just a motley crew. Once they lose, it's unlikely that they will flee to the south. Think about it, the supporting Immortal Island is in the south with tens of thousands of disciples and experts. If they flee to the south, they will definitely be worried about being attacked by the supporting Immortal Island. Therefore, it's unlikely that they will flee to the south. Yuan Jokue, according to what you said, do you think they will give up what's close at hand and go to the east? Duan Tianbua sneered with disdain. That's right. Once they lose, they will most likely take a detour to the east. Yuan Jokue gestured to the crowd and said, if we go south, even if we pass through the supporting Immortal Island, we will reach the vast demon ghost domain. Do you think that the motley crew of Everlasting Island can cross the demon ghost domain and go back? That should be impossible. Speaking of the demon domain, Duan Tianbo was stunned. Even he didn't believe that anyone could cross the demon domain. Since he couldn't find any reason to refute, he could only look at Yuan Jokue with a sullen face and continue, fleeing to the west is the hinterland of the Chinese cultivation world. Not to mention the front line of defense, if you go deeper, you'll find sentries everywhere. Once you're defeated, the sects entrenched there won't let you off easily. There's no need to mention the north. That's the closest route for them to escape. That's why we gathered our strongest forces to attack from the north. That's why the north isn't suitable for them to escape. After saying that, Yuan Jokue hugged his stomach and looked at everyone. He laughed and said, in that case, we don't have to worry about the south, west, and north. The place that we need to focus on is the east. That's why I feel that Yu Qianqiu and the other wandering cultivators should coordinate with us to defend the east. That way, we won't be able to block them all, but we can at least reduce the number of fish that slip through the net. The debate was well-founded and the demonic sects cheered, while the righteous sects looked inferior in comparison. The six-path demonic sect's late-stage tribulation transcendence revered elders slightly nodded and looked at Yuan Jokue with praise. Yuan Jokue slightly bowed to the elders and retreated. He seemed to be quite proud of himself. The Daluo sect's Luo Kun glanced coldly at Zhu Xianxian. He had also heard that Yuan Jokue and Yu Qianqiu had almost fought in the 100-Flower Valley. However, Yuan Jokue had expressed goodwill toward Yu Qianqiu several times, and after that, he and Yu Qianqiu had gotten along peacefully. How could he be like this fellow who couldn't distinguish the severity of the situation? When Luo Kun compared the two sides, he couldn't help but feel sick in his heart. They were both external managers of their sects, but the disparity between them wasn't small. Maida Luo sect simply picked a pig to be the manager. The Allure Beauty glanced at Yu Qianqiu, only to see him crossing his arms in front of his chest. Although this matter involved him, he didn't say a word. Half of his eyebrows were raised, and it seemed like the cold smile on his face never stopped. Luo Kun couldn't help but shake his head. These people's words were better than singing. Could it be that Yu Qianqiu was that good of a manager? If that was the case, then he wouldn't be Yu Qianqiu. Quan Deming looked at the various sects inquiringly. Seeing that no one said anything, he nodded and said, since that's the case, all wandering cultivators will return to the east. Yuan Jokue immediately beamed with joy as he looked at Yu Qianqiu with a smile that said, we're on the same side now. Who would have thought that Yu Qianqiu would greet him with a face full of ridicule? Yuan Jokue couldn't help but feel a chill in his heart. This fellow was too daring. Who did he learn this from? Yuan Jokue was really afraid that Yu Qianqiu would do something bad at the critical moment. Yu Qianqiu, do you have any objections? Yuan Jokue had no choice but to ask in advance so that no one would stab him in the back. When the various sects heard this, they looked at Yu Qianqiu and found that this fellow's indifferent attitude was really thought-provoking. The sword sect's Duan Tianbo was instantly amused. Or rather, he was gloating. Who could make this fellow's decision? As expected, Yu Qianqiu looked Yuan Jiukue up and down and said in a strange tone, "You're asking me what opinions I have. You all turned a blind eye to me and made the decision first. Now you're asking me what opinions I have. It's the first time I've seen such an unreasonable person in the cultivation world." Putting aside Yuan Jiukue's embarrassment, the one who was the most embarrassed was Fuxian Island's Quan Deming. It seemed like he was the one who made the final decision. Quan Deming opened his mouth and said with a bitter smile, "I've been negligent. Yu Qianqiu, you don't have to be calculative. If you have anything to say, you might as well say it. I have to give face to Elder Quan, and I've always been an honest person. I won't beat around the bush. Since that's the case, I'll speak the truth. If there's anything unpleasant in my words, please don't take it to heart." Yu Qianqiu glanced at the various sects and slowly said, "I've already been schemed against before I even arrived. Whether you all admit it or not, it's a fact that everyone is well aware of. I originally came here with a belly full of hot-bloodedness. I wanted to do my utmost for the Chinese cultivation world, even if I had to die 1,000 deaths. But there are deaths that are heavier than a mountain, and there are deaths that are lighter than a goose feather. Dying in battle for the Chinese cultivation world is heavier than a mountain, and dying from being schemed against is lighter than a goose feather. Everyone, you've really disappointed me. Since that's the case, instead of leaving me with lingering fear, it's better to let me continue to do my utmost until my death. I think we wandering cultivators shouldn't be included in this matter." The various sects looked at each other in dismay. It turned out that he just wanted to go it alone. Duan Tianbo looked at Yuan Jiukue, who had just spent a lot of time talking but was now in a daze. He couldn't help but smile. "Fight, my ass. So what if they won?" Quan Deming frowned and said, "Yu Qianqiu, we're all part of the Cultivation Alliance. Before the war, all sects should obey the unified arrangement. It's not good that you guys aren't included. It's true that all sects should obey the arrangement. But the key is that we're wandering cultivators. We don't belong to any sects, so we naturally don't need to follow the rules of the sections." Yu Qianqiu said with some emotion, "More than 600 people. We've only just arrived. More than 200 people died in the blink of an eye. If we didn't have some ability to protect ourselves, I'm afraid I wouldn't be able to stand and talk right now. Everyone, it's not that we don't want to follow the rules. But the lesson we just learned with the lives of 200 people is unforgettable. 200 dead people were a bunch of reasons, but what about 1,000 dead people?" Everyone cursed inwardly, their eyes inadvertently glancing at the Deluo sect, who didn't look happy. "You may be wandering cultivators, but since you've already joined the Cultivation Alliance, you should at least do your part." The Cultivation Alliance's budget of spiritual stones. Before Quan Deming could finish, Yu Qianqiu waved his hand and interrupted, "Elder Quan, don't worry. We wandering cultivators may be weak, but we're the most trustworthy. We'll never take money and not work. Even if we're not in the scope of the overall arrangement, we're still loyal. If you don't believe me, just wait and see." "What exactly do you mean? Just say it." Quan Deming didn't want to spar with him anymore. No matter how much he beat around the bush, he wouldn't get anything practical. "It's very simple." Yu Qianqiu patted his chest and said, "We wandering cultivators fight independently and look for opportunities on our own. We don't need to be included in the Cultivation Alliance's overall arrangement for the time being. We'll talk about the overall arrangement after our wounded hearts have calmed down a little. What do you think?" All the sects looked at each other, but no one expressed their opinion. They were all wondering how long it would take for their wounded hearts to calm down, especially when it came to looking for opportunities. That was quite unreliable. What if they couldn't find an opportunity? Also, everyone had to pay for the expenses of more than 400 wandering cultivators. The thought of someone taking money without doing any work made no one happy. Although it wasn't a lot, it was still unfair. This. Quan Deming pondered for a while, then looked at everyone and said, Fu Xian Island isn't in a position to make decisions for everyone. I wonder if anyone has any different opinions. At that moment, 100 Charm Demon Lady stood up and said with a smile, I've spent some time with the Wandering Cultivators, and I'm quite confident in their ability to look for opportunities to fight. Perhaps it's more suitable than our overall arrangement. On behalf of the Pink Sect, I agree that the Wandering Cultivators fight independently. Of course, you agree. Perhaps you've already slept on the same bed with Yu Qianqiu. You're a family. All the sects looked at 100 Charm Demon Lady ambiguously. At that moment, the 4 major families naturally wouldn't pass on the responsibility. Bai Shan said in a deep voice, the 4 major families agree. 10,000 demons had their own plans for Yu Qianqiu, so they also agreed. Hexapath Demon Sect's Yuan Jiukue looked around and laughed, it seems like my previous thoughts were a little shallow. Since 10,000 demons agree, then Hexapath Demon Sect will also support it. Fu Xian Island will listen to everyone's opinions. If anyone has any different opinions, feel free to voice them. Don't let it affect tomorrow's battle, said Quan Deming. Most of the sects remained silent, clearly unwilling to do so. However, no one was willing to offend Yu Qianqiu in front of them. This fellow's way of doing things was a little vengeful, and his strength was displayed in front of everyone. There was nothing that couldn't be resolved, so it was best not to provoke him. Everyone expressed their protest with silence. No objection means you agree. Thank you for your understanding and support. Yu Qianqiu nodded and turned to Quan Deming with cupped fists. Elder Quan, everyone's opinion is clear. Please make the final announcement. This will give us the right to fight. Everyone's expression twitched. They had never seen someone as shameless as him. Quan Deming looked around in shock and asked in a loud voice, are there really no objections from the sects? He looked around and no one said anything. He could only smile bitterly and say, since no one objects, then let's do it. He felt embarrassed to say anything, so he could only reply perfunctorily. Yu Qianqiu didn't think much of it. After all, this was what he wanted. He turned around and cupped his fists to thank everyone. However, most of them turned around and left. Who would want this kind of thanks? Chapter 426. The various sects had either left or dispersed. Only a few sects that were friendly with him were still there. Bai Shan came over and saluted. We knew that Mr. would come with a group of people, so we have already prepared a place for Mr. to stay. Before he could finish, Yu Qianqiu waved his hand and smiled. I appreciate your kindness, but there is no need to go through so much trouble. The flying instrument is more than enough for us to stay. The Allure Enchantress smiled and thought of the big comfortable bed on the flying instrument. At night, she could open the skylight to look at the night view, and after closing it, it was even more reliable than an iron wall. Naturally, it was safer than ordinary houses. There was one thing that the Allure Beauty still couldn't understand. She still couldn't see what the flying magic tool was made of, and she couldn't destroy it with her cultivation. She also suspected that it was the nether iron, but when she thought of the huge amount of materials needed to build the flying instrument, she denied this guess. She could not figure it out, but someone else could. Not long after Yu Qianqiu and Zi returned to the flying instrument, a subordinate came to report that the Corp Sect's principal elder and 3 consecrators had come to visit. Yu Qianqiu was startled. He had never interacted with the people of the Corp Sect, so why were they here? Although he could not figure it out, he still went out to greet them personally. As soon as he came out of the cabin, he saw the 4 people staring at the flying instrument with their mouths slightly open, as if they could not come back to their senses. Yu Qianqiu suddenly understood. He had heard from Wu Sihai that the Corpse's God sect had a treasure that was made of dark iron. Of course, the upper echelons of the Corpse's God sect were familiar with dark iron. For seniors, are you here to see me, Yu Qianqiu? Yu Qianqiu had an idea, but he still asked despite knowing the answer. The four people came back to their senses, and one of them came out to return the greeting. I am Tai Junshan, the external principal of the corpse sect, and these three are our consecrators. He then introduced the three people to Yu Qianqiu one by one. They were Jiang Huan, Feng Rutian, and Ji Feiming. Greetings, seniors. Yu Qianqiu cupped his fists, turned around, and said with a smile, I don't even have a place to receive guests here. If the four seniors don't mind, why don't you take a seat in the flying mystic instrument? The four of them couldn't wait to go in and take a look. They nodded happily and followed him in. The interior had already been separated by two raised panels, and the loose cultivators and the important parts were all blocked. 5 raised chairs were already waiting for the guests. Yu Qianqiu didn't want anyone to see what was going on inside. As the 5 of them sat down, Yu Qianqiu smiled and did not say a word as he watched the 4 of them fumble with the armrests of the seats. He let them slowly touch it to their heart's content and did not disturb them. After a long time, the 4 of them recovered from the shock. After looking at each other, Tai Junshan shook his head and said with a bitter smile, Yu Qianqiu, since you have these flying mystic instruments, you must know what they are made of. Yu Qianqiu leaned against the armrest, crossed his legs, and supported his chin with his hand. He smiled faintly and said, Of course I know. Senior Tai, if you have anything to say, just say it. I'm used to being honest and not used to beating around the bush. These words made the faces of the 4 of them twitch. Tai Junshan paused and said, Then I'll say it directly. Yu Qianqiu, if I'm not wrong, these flying mystic instruments of yours are all made of nether iron, right? That's right. Yu Qianqiu nodded slightly and signaled him to continue. It said that nether iron can only be found in the legendary nether cave. You can only find a small amount in the nether cave above the 8th level, but it's impossible to find so much. I don't know where you found so much. Can you tell the corpse sect? Tai Junshan asked with a trace of a pleading tone. Why should I tell you for no reason? Yu Qianqiu slightly frowned. The 3 consecrators of the corpse sect looked at each other. Jiang Huan said, Yu Qianqiu, we won't let you say it for no reason. We will reward you heavily after this. The 4 of them nodded together. Reward me heavily. Yu Qianqiu's eyes slightly brightened. He sat up straight and said bluntly, What kind of reward? Jiang Huan pondered and remembered that this guy had caused a lot of trouble for spirit stones, so he asked, How about spirit stones? As long as you tell us where you got them, we will reward you heavily with spirit stones. Spirit stones. How much would be appropriate? Yu Qianqiu thought for a while. In the eyes of these people, he seemed to be a little unmoved, which made them feel that it was not the same as what they had heard. Jiang Huan suddenly took out a storage pouch and said, If you can tell us the truth, I have 10 million top-rank spirit stones here. I can pay you in advance. If it turns out that what you said is true, I can give you another 10 million. I will definitely keep my promise. The other 2 consecrators didn't think much of it, but Tai Junshan frowned and smiled bitterly in his heart. What a generous offer. Giving away 10 million right off the bat, and even promised to follow up. Aren't you a little too impatient? Isn't this letting others know that we are thirsty for knowledge? Of course, he wouldn't say it out loud. However, Tai Junshan felt a little headache. These consecrators hadn't been outside for a long time, so their experience in dealing with external affairs was not as good as his. When he first arrived, he wanted to come alone because bringing 3 consecrators would be too eye-catching. However, the 3 old guys were very anxious and wanted to come with him. As an external manager, how could he refuse? 10 million. Yu Qianqiu was overjoyed. He thought, even if I tell you guys, you can't go. it would be a waste not to earn this money. However, when he looked at the storage pouch, his expression didn't change, but his pupils shrank slightly. Subconsciously, he quickly swept his gaze across the faces of these people, and his mind quickly began to calculate. Tai Junshan had already noticed Yu Chincho's abnormal reaction. His heart skipped a beat and thought, not good. I'm afraid I'm going to be ripped off. However, to his surprise, Yu Chincho gently pushed the storage pouch in front of him back and shook his head. A gentleman loves money, but he gets it in the right way. I, Yu Chincho, may not have a good reputation, but I still have a bottom line. I can't just casually say some words to earn your spirit stones. This goes against the way I, Yu Chincho, conduct. When he said this, everyone was shocked. 10 million was indeed a lot, but he actually rejected money that was given to him. This was too different from the rumored Yu Chincho. Jiang Huan was shocked. Could it be that you're too idle? Did Senior Jiang really think what I said was a joke? Yu Chincho shook his head and sighed. He lamented, looks like everyone's misunderstanding of me is not just a little bit deep. A misunderstanding is a misunderstanding. As long as you have a clear conscience, I only earn the money that I should earn. Even if you give me 10 billion spirit stones, I won't take a single one. He rejected the spirit stones that were already in his hands. Coupled with these words, everyone immediately felt a sense of respect for him. Only Tai Junshan asked doubtfully, could it be that you have something that you can't say? Or that you can't easily tell us the place where you can collect nether iron? Those who know what I know are my worries. Those who don't know me are asking for something. Looks like Elder Tai still has some doubts about me. Forget it, I don't need to defend myself anymore. Yu Chincho shook his head with a sorrowful expression. He looked around at everyone and said, I can tell you the place where you can collect nether iron, but don't mention the spirit stones again. Otherwise, it would be an insult to me, Yu Chincho. There was such a good thing. As everyone looked at each other, Yu Chincho said seriously, since Elder Tai knows about the nether cave and mentioned the 8 nether cave, how could you not know about the 9 nether cave? The 9 nether cave. Everyone was speechless. Tai Junshan hurriedly asked, it's not that I haven't heard of the 9 nether cave, but even if there is such a place, the legends say that it is extremely powerful. I'm afraid that no one can enter, so I didn't mention it. Could it be that the nether iron used to make these flying magic tools comes from the 9 nether cave? That's right, it is the 9 nether cave. Yu Chincho nodded. Everyone looked at each other speechlessly. Tai Junshan said in a low voice, you're not joking, right? Rumor has it that the 9 nether cave is the passage to the ghost world. It is said that even the legendary soul formation cultivators can't enter it. How could anyone go in and collect nether iron? Humans can't go in, but it doesn't mean that other things can't. Yu Chincho smiled faintly. Everyone was confused. Jiang Huan pondered for a while and asked, the 9 nether cave is the passage to the ghost world. You mean, could it be a ghost cultivator? Senior Jiang is so knowledgeable. Yu Chincho first flattered, then nodded and said, that's right, a ghost cultivator. Moreover, a ghost cultivator with an extremely high level of cultivation. Normal ghost cultivators can't enter it. Tai Junshan pointed at the flying magic tool and said, from what you said, could it be that the nether iron used to make these flying magic tools were all collected by ghost cultivators from the 9 nether cave? This ghost cultivator with such a high level of cultivation could do this for you. He clearly didn't quite believe it. Yu Chincho smiled faintly and had his own explanation. He tilted his body again and stared at Tai Junshan with his hand supporting his chin. I remember that the first time I met Elder Tai, it should be during the trial in the demonic ghost region. It seems that ever since that time, the 6 sects never held the trial in the demonic ghost region again. That's right, we did meet once, but you were still a little disciple of Fuxian Island at that time. Who knew that now? Tai Junshan shook his head emotionally. The little disciple from back then had achieved something that even he couldn't hope to achieve. His improvement was godly. Yu Qianqiu nodded and smiled. Ha! I still remember that many disciples of each sect were captured by a ghost king with extremely powerful cultivation. I racked my brains and spent a lot of effort to finally rescue the disciples of each sect. However, after all these years, how many people still remember my kindness to Yu Qianqiu? On the contrary, I heard many people call me a scum and a madman. Sigh. Human feelings are like flowing water. There are so many fickle people. Let's not talk about them. The disciples of the corpse sect were also rescued back then, and Tai Junshan was one of them. Hearing this, he looked at the three consecrators awkwardly. Of course, Jiang, Feng, and Ji also knew about this. After hearing this, they thought about what Yu Qianqiu had done to them back then and thought about what they had done to Yu Qianqiu now. They all sighed and felt that it was indeed everyone who had wronged him first. Jiang Huan nodded silently. Yu Qianqiu, it's all in the past. You're in the cultivation world now, so you should understand what's going on. There's no need to take it to heart. The three corpse sect consecrators looked at him with much gentler gazes, and they gradually let down their guard. Based on their intuition, such a sentimental person couldn't be that bad. Yu Qianqiu raised his brows and sneered. It's not to the extent of taking it to heart. It's just that those people who scolded me behind my back don't know how to touch their own consciences and ask themselves if they're ashamed or not. As Tai Junshan listened, he was suddenly startled. He thought to himself, where are we going in circles? Why are we talking about trivial matters? He then coughed and said, Yu Qianqiu, I wonder which ghost cultivator with an extremely high cultivation helped you gather the nether iron. Does our Huaxia cultivation world have such ghost cultivators? If there is, I wonder if you can introduce me to them. The third consecrator also came to a realization. The topic had gone too far and he almost forgot the purpose of this trip. More communication could reduce misunderstandings. Yu Qianqiu smiled knowingly and shook his head. Elder Tai, didn't I just tell you about that ghost cultivator with an extremely high cultivation? Why are you asking again? Did you just say it? Tai Junshan looked at the three consecrators who were also confused. He knew that they probably didn't get it either, so he lowered his head and pondered. He recalled every word that Yu Qianqiu said just now. After a long time, he suddenly raised his head and said in shock, the ghost cultivator you mentioned is. Are you referring to the Ghost King who captured the disciples of the various sects during the trial in the Demon Ghost region? The three consecrators suddenly came to a realization and exclaimed in unison, Ghost General. Yu Qianqiu nodded and said, during the trial in the Demon Ghost region, I was able to rescue the disciples of the various sects not because of my high cultivation, but because I got along well with the Ghost General. Therefore, he gave me some face and let the disciples go. Since I was chased out of Fuxian Island, many people wanted to kill me. There was no place for me in the cultivation world of China. I was forced to take the risk and go to the Demon Ghost region alone. The few of them looked at each other. No wonder the various sects couldn't find this guy. Even the Daluo sect couldn't find him when they sent people to look for him. It turned out that this guy had hidden in the Demon Ghost region. Who would go to that place to look for someone? It seemed that this guy had really gone all out to save his own life. Sigh. In terms of friendship, humans are inferior to ghosts. When I returned to the Demon Ghost region, the Ghost General immediately gave me a place to stay. Therefore, I focused on cultivating in the Demon Ghost region. Finally, my cultivation improved a little. Only then did I dare to come out and take a look. Before I came out, he personally gathered a lot of nether iron for me and asked me to make something for him on the way out. However, I felt that there was no use for so much nether iron, so I asked the Jing family of the 4 major families to help me make a flying magic tool. The few of them nodded. So that was the case. Looking at the flying magic tool again, they couldn't help but feel a little heartache. It was really a waste of natural resources to use this thing to make a flying magic tool. Tai Junshan asked tentatively, "What did the Ghost General ask you to make for him?" "Oh. Nothing much. He asked me to gather some spirit stones for him to bring back." Yu Qianqiu replied disapprovingly. Chapter 427. What do ghost cultivators need spiritual stones for? Tai Junshan asked in surprise. Although ghost cultivators were rarely seen in the Chinese cultivation world, everyone knew that ghost cultivators needed sufficient yin qi. Spiritual stones were of no use to them at all. It shouldn't be for him. Yu Qianqiu frowned and said, "I've lived in the demon ghost region for a long time. Although I don't know much about it, I can feel that there seems to be a very powerful person hiding there. The demon kings and the ghost kings seem to be afraid of this person. If I'm not wrong, the spiritual stones that the Ghost General asked me to gather should be for that person." Speaking of this, he suddenly came back to his senses and waved his hand with a smile. "I forgot myself. Look at me, why am I telling you this?" The expressions of Tai Junshan and the 3 consecrators were extremely solemn. Yu Qianqiu's words reminded them of the time when Ma Jiugu and several other experts at the end of the tribulation passing stage were injured together in the demon ghost domain. That incident was very strange. After the corpse sect analyzed it, they once suspected that there was a spirit-severing expert hiding there. Now, not only did Yu Qianqiu's words match some of their guesses, but it also made them believe that there was indeed a top expert hiding in the demon ghost region. They believed that with Yu Qianqiu's position in the Supporting Immortals Island, it was impossible for the Supporting Immortals Island to tell him such a thing. It should be limited to the top officials of the Supporting Immortals Island. From this, it could be inferred that what Yu Qianqiu said was true. However, they didn't know that Yu Qianqiu and Furong had an affair, and Furong's father had already told this prospective son-in-law. In Yu Qianqiu's words, lies had to be half true and half false. That way, it would be more credible. If it was all lies, it would be easy to expose it. Of course, it was not good to tell the whole truth. It was called telling the truth, not lying. Yu Qianqiu, is the Jiuyo Hell Cave in the Demon Ghost region? Tai Junshan asked. Yes, and it's under the Ghost General's Ghost King. Wait. Yu Qianqiu suddenly looked at them solemnly and said suspiciously, "Judging from your words, could it be that you want to go to the 9th Netherworld Cave to dig for nether iron? If that's the case, I advise everyone to give up on this idea. Let's not talk about the fact that you won't be able to make it to the 9 Netherworld Cave. Even if you did, the 9 Netherworld Cave is not a place that ordinary people can go to. I only stayed at the entrance of the cave for a while and almost lost my life. It's even more dangerous inside." Tai Junshan looked at the 3 consecrated masters and saw them nod slightly. He then said, "We are not arrogant enough to want to intrude the demon ghost territory. I just want to ask, with your relationship with the Ghost General, can you let him collect more dark iron? The Corpse's God sect is willing to trade with the Ghost General with spirit stones." Yu Qianqiu shook his head and said, "The Ghost General said that with his cultivation, he wouldn't dare to go in often. He's afraid that something might happen. I can't guarantee that I won't be able to persuade him. Moreover, I'm too embarrassed to ask him to take such a risk." If he had agreed immediately, they might have been a little suspicious. But this refusal made them even more certain that what he said was true. Jiang Huan handed over the storage bag in her hand and said, "Yu Qianqiu, you only need to ask Ghost General. Whether it's done or not, this 10 million is yours." To be honest, Yu Qianqiu really wanted to take this free money, but he still gritted his teeth and refused. No need to pay. After this battle, I can ask Ghost General. As for whether it's done or not, I can't guarantee it. They didn't expect him to refuse money that was given for free under such circumstances. It seemed like the rumors in the cultivation world were a little exaggerated. Yu Qianqiu, are you selling this flying instrument? Tai Junshan touched the armrest of his seat and suddenly asked. The three consecrated were slightly stunned. Then, they nodded slightly and looked at him. F***CK. They're really unscrupulous. Yu Qianqiu shook his head and said, it's not a question of whether I'm selling it or not, but I can't sell it. Because I've already promised a hidden master that I'll give it to him after using it for a while. He doesn't seem to know what the hell he wants the nether iron for. I'm a very trustworthy person, and I never go back on my word. Oh, right, can I ask something? What do you want the nether iron for? Tai Junshan was stunned. He flatly refused and said, this is my sex secret. It's not convenient for me to reveal it. Then, he asked, may I know which hidden master also needs the nether iron? Yu Qianqiu sneered in his heart. They kept their own secrets to themselves, but they were so open about other people's secrets. They were really selfish people. Yu Qianqiu smiled faintly and said, everyone calls him Mr. Nongzhu. Mr. Nongzhu. They remembered that the foreign cultivators mentioned this person during the saber drawing ceremony. It seemed like he was really an amazing person. Tai Junshan asked again, may I know who this Mr. Nongzhu is, and what does he want the nether iron for? Yu Qianqiu's face darkened. He said coldly, it seems like you're the ones asking and I'm the one answering. Every time I ask a question, you'll just say that it's my sex secret. Don't you think you're asking too much? Forgive me for not sending you off. He immediately turned hostile and asked them to leave. They quickly tried to comfort Yu Qianqiu, but he was too lazy to care. Jiang Huan had no choice but to remind him, then I'll have to trouble you with Ghost General. I'm a trustworthy person. I'll remember what I've promised. I'm tired. Please leave. Yu Qianqiu asked them to leave again. They had no choice but to leave. However, before they left, Jiang Huan still left the storage pouch behind. This time, Yu Qianqiu didn't refuse. He waited until they were far away before grabbing the storage pouch and tossing it in his hand. He looked at their backs and sneered, since you want the nether iron, how can a mere 10 or 20 million be enough to get rid of me? Do you really think I'm a beggar? After they left, Ji Feiming sent a telepathic message to Jiang Huan. He's already rejected us a few times. Why did you still give him the money? Jiang Huan replied, I gave it to him in the hope that he'll remember this matter after taking our money. What if he forgets or doesn't look for Ghost General at all? Ji Feiming frowned. That's easy. If he really dares to do that, the corpse sect doesn't mind paying a high price to snatch these flying instruments. Jiang Huan's previously amiable expression instantly turned ferocious. Limitless Island, dozens of miles away from Limitless Palace, in a deep mountain range, there was a waterfall that was almost 100 meters high. In the valley below, there was a clear pond, splashing water everywhere. A stream extended from the pond to the depths of the mountain. Occasionally, birds and beasts could be seen drinking by the stream. The valley was quiet and serene. Not far from the pool, at the foot of a mountain in the valley, there was a cave. It was obviously formed naturally, but it also showed signs of being dug and widened. There were 2 people guarding the entrance of the cave. They kept blocking the third party from entering. Yen Bugui pestered the entrance of the cave for a long time, but the 2 disciples didn't let him in. In the end, he could only anxiously shout a few times and leave. Not long after Yen Bugui left, a person slowly walked out of the cave. It was the seventh disciple of man who. He waved his hand at the two disciples. The disciple guarding the cave quickly rushed in. After a while, the two disciples came out with two corpses and quickly disappeared into the mountains. The seventh disciple's face was pale. His arms were faintly trembling. In the end, he simply crossed his arms and blocked the middle of the cave. The steps under his feet were still fresh. Obviously, it had not been long since they were dug. 200 to 300 meters deep into the cave, there was a huge space formed by stalactites. Man-Hu and his brothers were guarding the bottleneck of entering the space. The sixth disciple shook his head and said with a bitter smile, "The seventh disciple has always been bold." Just now, he pretended to be fine and his legs were slightly trembling. Obviously, he was afraid. Man-Hu withdrew his gaze from the depths of the cave and sighed, "Killing people is nothing to us. But to bleed tens of thousands of living people, as long as it is a normal person, they will be afraid. If you are not afraid, you can give it a try. Forget it." The sixth disciple waved his hand and said, "This is the first time I realized how cowardly I am. After seeing a few more, I don't want to go in anymore. That scene, I am afraid I will never forget it for the rest of my life. AI. Aren't we committing a sin?" The third disciple who had his head lowered suddenly muttered. It was unknown if he was talking to everyone or just talking to himself. Third disciple. Man-Hu walked over, shook his shoulder and said, "Everything is over, there is no need to kill anymore. The blood pool guide is already prepared. It is enough for young Palace Master to awaken the blood in his body into devil blood. At that time, the devil body and devil blood will fuse together. Young Palace Master will be able to cultivate the demonic book with half the effort. We will also be able to complete the task Master entrusted to us. 10,000 mortal lives awe." The third disciple covered his face with his hands and rubbed it. Man-Hu patted his shoulder and didn't say anything else. He turned his head and said, "Fourth disciple, think of a way to get a few more nascent soul cultivators in case the young Palace Master needs them. Why do I feel like I am a human trafficker in the mortal world?" The fourth disciple shook his head. Man-Hu raised his leg and kicked his butt. The fourth disciple hurriedly ran out. He has just started cultivating the demonic book, but the process is already so scary. It is hard to imagine what it will be like after he cultivates it. The fifth disciple said as he walked over. He moved his head closer to the group and said softly, "Big senior brother, do you think he will lose his humanity in the end, to the point where he won't even recognize us?" "What nonsense are you talking about?" Man-Hu pushed the fourth disciple's head away. He subconsciously turned around and looked inside. The others also followed his gaze. The fifth disciple was unrepentant. He moved his head closer and said in a low voice, "Did you guys notice? Ever since the young Palace Master started cultivating the demonic book, his eyes have become colder and colder. I can't see any trace of humanity in his eyes." "Nonsense, the young Palace Master is already going to become a demon. He doesn't even want to be a human anymore. What is the point of having humanity?" The sixth disciple said sarcastically. Man-Hu glared at him. Just as he was about to teach him a lesson, a bubbling sound came from inside. However, it was even more sonorous than the sound of a bubble exploding. The echoes in the deep and empty cave made people's hair stand on end. The few of them looked at each other and quickly rushed into the cave. Chapter 428. Inside the cave, stalactites formed into stalagmites of all shapes and sizes. Some were thick, some were thin, some were long, some were short, some were exquisite, some were ferocious. A few luminous pearls were placed in conspicuous places, emitting a soft and weak light, making the darkness in the cave even darker. The light in the slightly brighter places seemed a little pale, giving off a strong sense of oppression. In the center of the cave, there was a 5-meter square pool filled with a red liquid. The strong smell of blood, coupled with the bloodstains around the pool, it was not difficult to determine that the red liquid in the pool was blood. At this time, there was an undercurrent slowly surging at the bottom of the blood pool, occasionally producing bubbles. The thousands of giant venomous snake goo that were thrown into the pool were crazily swimming around, seemingly extremely afraid. Unfortunately, the surrounding pool walls were too high, half of their bodies fell down as soon as they were attached, but they were still desperately climbing, hoping to escape from the blood pool. As the snakes crazily stirred in the blood pool, more and more bubbles emerged, and goo-goo sounds were heard incessantly, gradually resembling boiling water. The venomous snakes that climbed up the walls slowly slid into the blood pool as if they were shedding their skin, but their snake-like bones were still attached to the walls. In the blink of an eye, the walls of the blood pool were filled with ferocious white bones. Not long after, the snake goo that were still wandering around were all dead. The smell of blood became increasingly strong, and a bloody mist slowly rose from the blood pool, spreading throughout the entire underground space. Such an abnormal movement made Man-Hu and the other three pale. Only when the red bloody mist covered the entire space did the movement occur again. The bloody mist churned, and as if it had intelligence, it began to condense into countless snake-like long strips that wandered everywhere in the space. Man-Hu and the other three looked around, not even daring to breathe loudly. Suddenly, the slithering blood mist red snakes stopped in unison and slowly turned their heads to look at the four of them. Although the four of them had a high cultivation base, they were still horrified by the scene before them. The bloody mist snakes swayed their tails cheerfully, as if they had found their prey. They opened their bloody mouths and swarmed towards the four. The four were greatly alarmed and instantly released their protective aura. Ha! Just as the group of snakes was about to approach the four of them, a muffled warning sound suddenly reverberated in the underground space. No one knew where it came from. The group of snakes instantly stopped in the air, not daring to take another step forward. They seemed to be shivering in the air as they turned their heads to look at the blood pool. Man-Hu and the others also looked towards the blood pool with lingering fear. They saw two faint red lights at the bottom of the blood pool. The red light grew brighter and brighter. It was obvious that it was slowly approaching the surface of the blood pool. Hua! First, a head popped out of the blood pool. Then, the whole body slowly rose up. Finally, a bloody person stood motionlessly 2 meters above the blood pool. The demonic red eyes stared coldly at the four of them. Man-Hu and the other three could be considered to be experienced and knowledgeable, but after seeing this person, they still couldn't suppress the panic on their faces. He was completely naked and covered in blood. He was so skinny that he looked like a dried-up firewood. His limbs were thin and withered, and the ribs on both sides of his abdomen were like ravines. His long blood-stained hair was scattered and stuck to his narrow cheeks and shoulders. He was simply a dried-up corpse. However, the pair of slowly moving blood-red eyes told the four that he was still alive. Such an appearance was neither human, ghost, demon, nor a dried-up corpse. Could this be the appearance of a devil? Man-Hu and the other three looked at each other dumbfoundedly. They naturally knew that this person was the young palace master, Yan Zhuixing. However, with such an appearance, how could they go out and meet people in the future? Her. Yan Zhuixing's withered arms spread out. His already withered mouth opened, revealing his white teeth. An ear-piercing shriek came from his throat and echoed in the underground space. The blood-mist red snakes were originally shivering and shriveling. But when the ear-piercing shriek came out, they immediately swarmed over as if they heard a summon. Man-Hu and the other three's eyes widened and their faces were filled with disbelief. Yan Zhuixing's wide-open mouth was like the mother hole of a group of snakes. The blood-mist red snakes couldn't wait to burrow into his mouth one after another. On the other hand, Yan Zhuixing's mummified body was gradually swelling up. The blood on his body was also dripping into the blood pool. The disgusting scene made people want to vomit. When the last blood-mist red snake was swallowed, Yan Zhuixing closed his mouth. The demonic red light in his eyes gradually disappeared and he returned to a normal person's calmness. Although he was still naked, his full body was like a normal person's. The only difference was that his body was covered in blood. Man Hu and the other three looked at each other. Although they still had lingering fears, they finally heaved a sigh of relief and retracted their aura barrier. Yan Zhuixing, who was floating in the air, lowered his head and looked at his body. Suddenly, his figure flashed and he directly flew out of the cave. He can fly in the air. He has already reached the crossing calamity stage. His progress is really fast. As expected of someone who cultivates the demonic book. Man Hu exclaimed. Third brother nodded slightly and said, according to the demonic book, he should now be in the demon general stage. After advancing by leaps and bounds and breaking through to the soul formation stage, he will be in the demon king stage. I wonder what the great demon king stage will be like after that. Bang! Suddenly, a loud sound came from outside. The sound echoed in the cave. The four looked at each other. Don't talk nonsense. Let's go and see what happened. Man Hu waved his hand and the four flew out of the cave. As soon as the four of them came out of the cave, they saw a big hole on the side of the cave opening. There was a crashing sound inside, and they saw seventh brother rushing out with his face covered in dirt. He shouted angrily, "Who attacked us?" He turned around and saw his four senior brothers looking at him in surprise. He was stunned and said, "Did you guys hit me?" The four looked at each other and didn't pay attention to him. They all looked around. After a while, their gazes all focused on the big boulder under the waterfall. They saw Yan Zhuixing sitting naked under the waterfall, letting the waterfall hit him. His red body was washed clean. A strong and majestic body welcomed the impact of the waterfall freely. If it wasn't for the fact that they were familiar with his face, they would have thought that they saw the wrong person. Yan Zhuixing's body was originally thin and weak. Now, he was so strong. It was unbelievable. After waiting for about an hour, Yan Zhuixing fiercely dove into the deep pool. He came out of the water not far away from them. After climbing ashore, he walked towards them naked. His skin was white and tender. It was better than a woman's skin. The four couldn't help but look at Yan Zhuixing's lower body again. They saw that his penis seemed to have grown a lot. They couldn't help but secretly click their tongues. This demonic book really had many miraculous effects. Man Hu threw a storage pouch to Yan Zhuixing. He asked with an ugly expression, "Young palace master, did you make a move on my seventh junior brother?" He could endure other things, but he couldn't help but ask about it when he made a move on his junior brother. Yan Zhuixing took out some clothes from his storage pouch. As he wore them, he said indifferently, "When I came out earlier, I suddenly saw someone blocking the center of the cave. He didn't look like a guard. I thought it was someone trespassing, so I made a move. When I discovered it was your seventh brother, although it was too late, I still managed to reduce most of the force. Otherwise, he would have been heavily injured even if he didn't die from my little devil fist. How could he still be standing here?" After he wore his clothes, he tidied up his hair and immediately turned back into a refined and handsome young man. He then looked at Man Hu indifferently and said, "State Preceptor, don't take it to heart. It was an unintentional move. It was a misunderstanding earlier." They turned back to look at their junior brother. Seventh brother touched his body and smiled widely, "I'm really fine." Ha! However, the force of that punch wasn't small. It made my blood boil and I almost vomit. Seeing that his junior brother was fine, Man Hu frowned and said, "Since it was a misunderstanding, then forget it." Oh right, congratulations on awakening the devil blood, young palace master. The other junior brothers congratulated him. This is all thanks to State Preceptor's generous gift of the Devil Book. Yan Zhuixing looked around at the green mountains and rivers and sighed, Devil Book, Devil Book. It truly deserves to be called a classic. In the current cultivation world, people are divided by their cultivation. Occasionally, there are some good techniques that can be used to establish a sect. Humph. They are all frogs at the bottom of a well. Young palace master, you must not be careless. The cultivation world is filled with hidden dragons and crouching tigers. Those top experts are all talented people. Most of them have researched one or two techniques that they are good at. They are not something we tribulation passing stage can compare to. Man who solemnly warned. Oh. Are they the spirit-severing experts you mentioned? Yan Zhuixing asked indifferently. That's right. Man who nodded and said, those people's abilities are beyond the reach of the world. They are already standing at the peak of this world. The so-called final stage of tribulation passing stage is nothing but an ant in their eyes. State Preceptor, there is something I don't understand. China's cultivation world is so big, but why isn't there a single spirit-severing expert? On the contrary, in your tiny country, almost every country has a spirit-severing expert. Yan Zhuixing turned his head and asked, logically speaking, with such a large proportion of cultivators in China's cultivation world, there should be many experts. Why isn't there any? Could it be that different places raise different people? China's soil can't raise spirit-severing experts? This is really puzzling. I hope State Preceptor can dispel my doubts. The junior brothers looked at each other awkwardly. Man who shook his head and smiled bitterly, that's not the case. In fact, most of the spirit-severing experts came from China's cultivation world and originally lived in seclusion there. However, more than 1,000 years ago, a madman suddenly appeared in China's cultivation world. He went around looking for spirit-severing experts to spar with. Those spirit-severing experts were so annoyed by his harassment that they all moved out of China's cultivation world for peace. So that's how it is. Yan Zhuixing nodded and asked in a doubtful tone, then can I understand it this way? None of the spirit-severing experts in China's cultivation world was a match for that madman, so they were forced to flee? Maybe that's possible. I don't know the specifics. Man who awkwardly touched his forehead. Wasn't his master also scared away by that person? Chapter 429. Yan Zhuixing glanced at him indifferently. He could roughly guess what was going on, so he didn't linger on this topic. Instead, he said, I want to find a suitable place to cultivate the raging inferno devil wind, and I need the netherworld fire to refine it. Does State Preceptor know where the 9th netherworld cave is? The 9 netherworld cavern. The few of them cried out involuntarily. The Marshall brothers looked at each other. Why? Is there a problem? Yan Zhuixing asked in surprise. Man who shook his head helplessly. The 9th netherworld cave is indeed a place, but I advise you not to go there. You should cultivate other techniques first. It won't be too late to go when young palace master's cultivation is successful, or if you drag it out for a few years. Yan Zhuixing was puzzled. Why is that? The Raging Inferno Devil Wind is an extremely powerful defensive technique. I hope to master it as soon as possible. State Preceptor, are you afraid that I can't enter the 9th netherworld cave? Don't worry about that. My demonic body shouldn't be afraid of those external evils. This man who hesitated for a moment before he bitterly smiled and said, Young Palace Master, I won't hide it from you. The 9th netherworld cave is in the demon domain, and the demon domain is the domain of the madman I mentioned before. It is a forbidden area in the entire cultivation world. Trespassers don't have a good ending. He finally added, even soul formation cultivators are no exception. Demon domain. Yan Zhuixing was a bit moved. He wasn't afraid of that madman, but he had grown up in the cultivation world, so he naturally heard a lot about the demon domain. It was a place where countless demonic ghosts gathered. It was indeed a forbidden area in the cultivation world. Isn't the demon domain formed naturally? Why is it controlled by someone? No matter how calm Yan Zhuixing was, he couldn't help but ask in surprise, what kind of person is that madman you're talking about? The soul formation cultivators are afraid of him, but why are so many demonic ghosts under his control? Speaking of that madman, the expressions of the senior and junior brothers were indescribable. Man Hu said in a deep voice, this person is known as the world's #1 expert. He's this generation's punishment envoy of the demon domain. His cultivation is unfathomable. There were once 16 soul formation cultivators who joined forces to fight him, but they all died in his hands. Until now, no one in the world is his match. The world's #1 expert. Yan Zhuixing mumbled to himself. His eyes immediately turned blood red, and there was clearly a sliver of excitement on his face. After a long time, his eyes returned to normal. He slowly let out a breath and said, in the future, I must seek guidance from this world's #1 expert. Otherwise, I would have wasted my time in this world. Man Hu repeatedly waved his hand and said, young palace master, please don't be impulsive. This person's cultivation has already exceeded the scope of a deity transformation expert. Although the young palace lord had cultivated the demonic book, she had yet to master it. With young palace master's current cultivation, I'm afraid you won't even be able to last half a move against him. You must not act blindly without thinking. Yan Zhuixing smiled and shook his head, although I'm confident that I can meet him in the future, it's not now. I'm not that arrogant. The few of them heaved a sigh of relief, but then they heard him say, since it's not convenient for us to cultivate the great body protection technique for now, we'll have to first forge a suitable transcendent artifact. In the demonic book, there's a transcendent artifact called the Bloodthirsty Demon Blade. However, I don't know where to find the materials to forge it. I suspect that it's the bloodthirsty pearl of the Demon Blood Palace. Does the State Preceptor have a way to help me obtain it? That's not a problem. As long as the Chinese cultivation world is defeated, the bloodthirsty pearl will be easily obtained. Man Hu nodded. I've been in seclusion for many days. I wonder how the war is going. Let's return to the Limitless Palace. Yan Zhuixing called out to the few of them and quickly flew towards the Limitless Palace. In the Limitless Palace, cultivators from various countries could be seen everywhere. However, everyone seemed to not care about Palace Master Yan Bugue. They casually discussed with each other and made a decision. Although Yan Bugue was sitting in the middle, he was obviously left to the side. Nothing required his consent. After Yan Zhuixing and the others arrived, they strode into the palace. Man Hu and his senior brothers followed closely behind him. They looked exactly like Yan Zhuixing's subordinates. The cultivators from various countries were slightly shocked. They discovered that Yan Zhuixing's cultivation had actually reached the early stage of tribulation passing. His cultivation speed was too fast. Seeing his son return, Yan Bugue immediately became spirited. Man Hu and the others were his son's hardcore followers. With their arrival, things would be easier. However, he immediately displayed the dignity of a father and said in a deep voice, I wanted to see you, but I was stopped time and time again. What is the meaning of this? Yan Zhuixing glanced at Man Hu and the others. He bowed and said, Father, please forgive me. I'm at a crucial point in my cultivation. I really can't be disturbed. That's why I refuse to let anyone in. That's right, I heard that father was going to fetch mother and sister. I wonder how things are going. After he said that, a few sneers came from the surroundings. Yan Zhuixing suddenly looked back and a pair of cold and emotionless eyes immediately suppressed the sneers. He then turned back and asked, "Father, did something happen?" Yan Bugue slowly told him what happened that day. When he talked about Yu Qianqiu's attack, his expression was as if he wanted to skin him alive. That's true. If it wasn't for Yu Qianqiu's interference, Bai Hua Fairy and Yan Zixia would have already been kidnapped to Everlasting Island. Yu Qianqiu again. From father's words, it seems that Yu Qianqiu purposely let father go. Yan Zhuixing frowned as he said that, as if he couldn't understand why Yu Qianqiu would do that. Then he turned around and looked at the old man in brocade robe. He said indifferently, "Senior Chang, you dare to take my mother and sister hostage." The old man in brocade robe was also shocked by his cold eyes. But he wasn't afraid of Yan Zhuixing. He stroked his beard and smiled, "I was forced to do that. If I didn't do that, I'm afraid your father and I wouldn't be able to return." Yan Zhuixing, hearing you say that, do you think I did something wrong? What do you think? Yan Zhuixing asked expressionlessly. The old man in brocade robe squinted his eyes as he looked at Man Hu and the others. One of the disciples next to him sneered, "You really don't know what's good for you, no wonder you became a stray dog. Look at my eyes." Yan Zhuixing suddenly shouted coldly at the disciple who spoke. His eyes suddenly turned into a demonic blood-red color, and there was a faint red glow in them. The people in front of him subconsciously stared at his eyes and instantly felt their minds go blank. The disciple's expression was even more sluggish. Taking advantage of the moment when everyone was in a daze, Yan Zhuixing immediately turned into a phantom and disappeared. The old man in brocade robe had a high cultivation, so he was the first to wake up. He shouted, "You dare," and fiercely reached out his claw to grab the phantom. But the phantom returned as fast as it came. Everyone was awakened by his shout. They saw that the disciple next to him didn't even make a sound before he fell straight down. There was a big hole in his abdomen, and blood flowed out non-stop. Everyone was shocked. When they turned around to look at Yan Zhuixing, they saw that he was holding a fist-sized phantom of an infant in his blood-stained hand. He stuffed it into his mouth and swallowed it with a gulp. Such a disgusting scene of swallowing an infant made everyone feel nauseous. Yan Bugue was initially excited by his son's agile skills, but who knew that he would see such a scene? His face instantly turned pale. Swallowing a nascent soul. Everyone immediately had the same thought. The old man in brocade robe was also shocked. He immediately pointed his finger and shouted, "Evildoer." As soon as he finished speaking, his figure flashed. Yan Zhuixing lightly floated backwards. Man Hu and the others did not hesitate to block in front of him. Man Hu pushed his palm and shouted, "Chang Mandong, stop. Otherwise, don't blame us for being impolite." The old man in brocade robe, Chang Mandong, also knew that he wasn't a match for them. After stopping, he pointed at them and said, "I was wondering why I kept seeing cultivators' corpses floating on the sea. All of them either had their nascent soul or their core formation removed. I was puzzled. So it was all done by this evildoer. Man Hu, what are you guys doing?" Yan Zhuixing wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth and sneered, "If you dare to speak rudely again, I don't mind taking out your nascent soul to have a taste." The group of people in the hall looked at each other. This was the first time they saw someone swallow a nascent soul. Yan Bugue was already so shocked that he couldn't speak. Man Hu turned around and cupped his hands, "Young palace master, please calm down. Brother Chang's cultivation is profound. It will only be beneficial for us to attack the Huaxia Cultivation Alliance." Ha! Good. Chang Mandong was so angry that he laughed. "Man Hu, from what you said, do you think I'm not a match for this evildoer? Brother Chang, don't misunderstand. I just don't want everyone to. Before man who could finish, there was a sudden dong 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 sound of alarm coming from outside. Everyone's expression changed. A person flashed into the hall and reported to everyone, a large number of cultivators are quickly approaching our Wuji Island. It should be the Huaxia Cultivation Alliance. They want to launch a large-scale attack on us. There was no need to say anything more. This was related to everyone's interests. Everyone in the hall almost instantly flashed out, leaving only the old man in brocade robe, Man Hu, and the others facing each other. Man Hu immediately said, "Brother Chang, the overall situation is more important. Don't forget your master's instructions." Yan Zhuixing, "I'll settle this score with you later." Chang Mandong waved his sleeve and disappeared from the hall. Yan Zhuixing sneered. Together with Man Hu and the others, they flashed to the outside of the palace and looked over. From the north, they saw a black mass of people blotting out the sky and covering the earth. In an instant, countless people from Limitless Island rose into the sky and quickly went to meet the invading enemies. Suddenly, light flashed in the distant sky and the sound of fighting could be heard. In the sky, not too far away from the group battle, 4 flying artifacts stood side by side. One of them had its front and back cover opened. There were a lot of coconuts piled up on the back cabin. It couldn't be helped, there were a lot of coconuts near the sea. Yu Qianqiu held a coconut in his hands, and a black flaming flying sword flashed out. It immediately cut a hole in the coconut, and he casually took out a hollow stalk of rice and inserted it into the hole. Just as he was about to eat it, he saw Zi bring over a large coconut, swapping it with the one in his hands. Yu Qianqiu was slightly startled. He saw Zi standing at the transparent crystal window and watching the battle in the distance. She held a coconut and opened her mouth to sip on the coconut juice in satisfaction. Yu Qianqiu helplessly shook his head and made another coconut. He held the coconut and stood by the window to watch the battle with Zi. You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.